Chapter 1112. Su Yu glanced at the central prefecture's king coldly. Under the central prefecture's furious gaze, Su Yu opened his mouth and swallowed the whole heart. Hey, Aunt. The central prefecture's king was furious. The bloodline of the cultivation deity that he had cultivated for more than 10 years had been taken away by Su Yu. However, the central prefecture's king had to shut his mouth immediately. As soon as he was distracted, the 2 death daggers rushed into his body quickly. He had to concentrate on suppressing the death daggers. Su Yu also closed his eyes slowly to digest the bloodline of the cultivation deity. Time passed little by little. Both the central prefecture's king and Su Yu were racing against time. One was dissolving the death airflow in his body, and the other was refining the bloodline of the cultivation deity. The one who got the first opportunity would win. Qin Xianer was getting nervous. Xia Jingyu could only predict the situation that led Su Yu here. After that, she couldn't see the future because of the existence of the 39 ordeals. She couldn't predict whether Su Yu would be dead or alive. They chose to fight with the central prefecture's king in this risky way. The result was unpredictable. Half a day passed. The central prefecture's king stabilized the death airflow and was gradually forcing it out of his body. The bloodline of the cultivation deity in Su Yu's body also showed signs of merging with Su Yu. The 2 of them were equally matched. It was impossible to determine who would take the first opportunity. Qin Xianer leaned on Su Yu's side and pressed her small hands on her chest. She looked at Su Yu with firm eyes. Another half a day passed. The 9th day of the human tribulation, the last day. The central prefecture's king had forced out 30% of the death airflow. After forcing out another 30%, he could suppress the other 40% airflow with his cultivation. Su Yu had also refined 30% of the bloodline of the cultivation deity. The bloodline of the cultivation deity had started to work. His cultivation of the grade 9 fairy was growing crazily, like weeds. He had broken through the Almighty Realm and reached the grade 6 Almighty Realm. However, it was far from enough. If Su Yu was given another half a day, it would be enough. Finally, half a day passed. There was only half a day left before the outbreak of the human tribulation. The central prefecture's king could barely move. He had forced out nearly 60% of the death airflow in his body. He would be able to kill Su Yu soon before the bloodline of the cultivation deity was completely merged. As for Su Yu, his cultivation had just skyrocketed to the level of all creations. He was still a whole level away from the peak of the mortal fairy. Qin Xianer clenched her teeth, held Su Yu's waist, and flew away. At the same time, she said to him through telepathy, "Brother Su Yu, you continue with the lotus. Leave the rest to me. We still have a backup plan." An hour later, in front of Qin Xianer's thatched cottage, she raised her palm and shattered the thatched hut. Beneath the thatched hut was a transportation formation that had been prepared a long time ago. Moreover, it was an extremely rare super transportation formation that could allow one to travel across an entire province. Although Su Yu was cultivating, he was still aware of his surroundings, and he was shocked. How could the 2 of them set up a super teleportation array? In order to set up this array, not only did it require a spatial array master who was proficient in spatial calculations, but it also required a huge amount of resources. At the very least, it required the resources of a prefecture's king to set up a super teleportation array. Sister Jingyu and I discussed that if we fail, we can leave a way out. This teleportation array was set up by Sister Jingyu. She has read all the books on spatial arrays in the world, and after studying them for half a year, she has become a master of spatial arrays. Qin Xianer said enviously. Her? Su Yu was relieved. As long as there was anything in this world that required comprehension, there was probably nothing that could stump her. But setting up a teleportation array requires a huge amount of resources, right? How did she get so many resources? Su Yu asked in surprise. Jinlong City had almost lost its foothold. Where could she find so many resources? Qin Xianer said, "Isn't it simple? Just dismantle the legacy of the divine level transportation formation. Back then, we decided to settle down here after discovering the ruins. Later on, we discovered that the ruins were actually a barren, God-tier teleportation array. After Big Sister Jingyu's efforts, we managed to restore part of its functions, allowing us to teleport back and forth multiple times. Big Sister Jingyu used the remaining materials to build this super teleportation array." Su Yu was surprised. "Who set up the divine level transportation formation in the belly of the mountain and this place? What is the purpose of this teleportation array?" Su Yu was quite confused when he thought of the skeleton of the ice frost dragon, which had been lying in the belly of the mountain for many years. "Brother Su Yu, let's go. The Central Prefecture's king should be here soon." Qin Xianer led Su Yu out of the teleportation array and left this place. 1 hour later, the Central Prefecture's king arrived at this place slowly. Staring at the dim teleportation array, he was quite annoyed. The other teleportation array had been destroyed. Su Yu escaped again. "Ants, traitor, I will make you beg for death." The Central Prefecture's king glanced at them coldly. Then he turned around and looked at the royal beast prefecture. This desolate prefecture had become a ghost town. Because of the sudden arrival of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, most of the families and sects didn't even have time to clear away their belongings. That was why many teleportation arrays could be preserved. Near the Holy Spirit Imperial Beast faction, a teleportation array hidden in an abandoned valley was lit up suddenly. Then, Qin Xianer walked out of it. She held Su Yu's waist with one hand and grabbed his arm with the other hand. Then, she helped Su Yu walk out of the teleportation array strenuously. "Brother Su Yu, don't worry. Just focus on refining it. I won't let you go unless I die." Qin Xianer wiped away the beads of sweat on her forehead as she helped Su Yu up the Holy Spirit Imperial Beast School. After the incident of the glittering jewel mortal fairy, the Holy Spirit Imperial Beast faction had become a dead place. No one would come here except for ghosts. Qin Xianer supported Su Yu with difficulty and rushed to the teleportation array in the faction. Then she said happily, "As expected, it is still the same as half a year ago. It is not seriously damaged." Half a year ago, when the glittering jewel mortal fairy was ravaging the royal beast prefecture, she and Xia Jingyu came here at the most dangerous time and set up the teleportation array in the valley. Su Yu was speechless, but his heart was full of warmth. Because of their clever arrangement, it was very convenient for him to use the abandoned teleportation array in this place. No one would stop him. If it were in other prefectures, no one would dare to disobey the Central Prefecture's king and allow Su Yu to use the teleportation array. Qin Xianer put Su Yu down carefully. Then, she bent down to check the teleportation array. She said worriedly, "In theory, this super teleportation array can teleport us to any super teleportation array in the continent. However, because we are worried that the glittering jewel mortal fairy will use this teleportation array to reach their territory, most of the teleportation arrays on the other side have been closed. Now, there is only one place that we can go to, but we don't know where it leads to." After checking the teleportation array, Qin Xianer sat beside Su Yu. Then, she looked around nervously like a little white rabbit. All of a sudden, Su Yu felt a sense of unease in his heart, and he said distractedly, "He's almost here." Originally, the journey would only take 1 hour. However, it took the Central Prefecture's king 4 hours. His strength was really suppressed by Su Yu. Qin Xianer had prepared for this. She helped Su Yu up and put the crystals into the teleportation array. Then, they entered the teleportation array quickly. When the Central Prefecture's king arrived, they had already teleported away. However, as he stared at the teleportation array in the Holy Spirit Beast faction, the Central Prefecture's king said sarcastically, "Don't you know how the glittering jewel mortal fairy, who was besieged by the 5 prefectures' kings half a year ago, disappeared overnight?" Swish! He tore the void with one hand. His speed was dozens of times faster than before. His strength was recovering rapidly. Chi. With a dull sound, Qin Xianer and Su Yu appeared in a dark, underground secret room. As soon as they got out of the room, they smelled a pungent smell. When they opened their eyes, they saw the corpses that had lost their hearts and souls were piled up like a mountain. Su Yu's heart sank when he saw this. This is the underground of the Central Prefecture's palace. Isn't this the place where the glittering jewel mortal fairy is hiding? These corpses were enough to explain the situation. Hearing this, Qin Xianer was also surprised. What? The Central Prefecture's palace? How could we be here? I was careless. Su Yu's face darkened slightly. Who else dared to open the teleportation array to accommodate the glittering jewel mortal fairy except the Central Prefecture's king? The only place where the teleportation array was opened must be the Central Prefecture's palace. Then let's run away quickly. This is the nest of the Central Prefecture's king. Who knows how many experts are left here? Qin Xianer was anxious. It didn't matter if she died, but she didn't want to implicate Su Yu. Su Yu waved his hand. It's too late. Let's try our best. If my guess is right, there should be a slim chance of survival. After saying that, Su Yu refined the cultivation deity's bloodline in his body immediately. Now he had refined 80% of it. His cultivation had skyrocketed to the mortal fairy realm temporarily. However, there was still a long way to go before he reached the peak. He still needed 5.5 hours. Only 5.5 hours were left before the ordeal of human broke out. Whether he could survive the ordeal of human or not depended on the last 5.5 hours. Maybe it sensed Su Yu's crisis. The divine nine-dragon cauldron also gushed out divine blood at this moment. With the help of the divine blood, Su Yu's refining speed was increased by 10%. Su Yu was delighted. In this way, he could save 10 minutes. Time passed bit by bit. 2 hours later, Su Yu refined 90% of the bloodline. His cultivation had surpassed the second stage of mortal fairy. He was still 2 stages away from the peak. Another 2 hours later, Su Yu refined 95% of the bloodline. His cultivation had reached the third stage of mortal fairy. Only 5% was left before he could completely integrate the cultivation deity's bloodline. However, it was too late. Although the divine nine-dragon cauldron kept pouring the divine blood, it still needed 10 minutes. Su Yu could feel the anxiety in his heart. The Central Prefecture's king was coming. Was he going to fail on the verge of success? He just needed to complete it. When Su Yu was feeling anxious, a lazy, strange laughter came from his mind. Hey, boy, you're going to die soon. Should I scatter flowers or scatter flowers? Oh no, you're the most vicious guy. You won't let me out, even if you die. In this way, won't I die with you? No. I can't die in such an unknown way. After saying that, Su Yu's eyes automatically showed reincarnation ripples. Strands of pure divine power flowed out of his eyes and merged into Su Yu's body. Suddenly, the speed of refining the cultivation deity's bloodline was more than 10 times faster. Is this the divine power of the evil god? Su Yu was secretly surprised. When did he recover so much that his divine power could penetrate the soul space? In other words, the soul space couldn't control this evil god at all. However, there was no time to think about it now. The Central Prefecture's king was coming. Chapter 11:13. This was because Su Yu could even hear the sound of his heart thumping wildly due to his uneasiness. The Central Prefecture's king was very close to this place. Clenching his teeth, Su Yu used the divine power of the evil god for one last gamble. His realm was skyrocketing, quickly reaching the critical point of the third stage of the mortal fairy realm, and he was rushing towards the last stage. Once he reached that level, he would be able to use the celestial vanquishing arrow. However, at this very moment, 2 figures suddenly appeared in the dark, underground, secret chamber. A man and a woman, whose whole bodies were shrouded in ghost energy, walked toward Suyu with their hands clasped behind their backs. When he revealed his face, Suyu's pupils contracted. Tian Rinyao, Tian Yu. It's you guys? Suyu was extremely shocked. The two of them could actually appear without a sound, without any aura fluctuations. What kind of cultivation level were they at? Tian Rinyao was extraordinarily handsome and had a faint smile on his face. Tian Yu, on the other hand, glared at Suyu with slight displeasure. Brother Su, how have you been? Tian Rinyao was still smiling. When we parted ways in the Heavenly Knife region, do you remember what I said? Of course, he remembered. The next time they met, they would be enemies. Suyu's heart sank. How could he have forgotten that the central prefecture was now occupied by the Ghost Clan? The Ghost Clan was the ally of the central prefecture's king. 100 years ago, they plotted against Shin Ichen together. 100 years later, he made a comeback and conspired to conquer the 9 prefectures. You didn't even inform me in advance before cultivating in my territory. Brother Su, are you looking down on me? Tian Rinyao said with a faint smile, but a dangerous light gradually appeared in his eyes. Tian Yu's pretty face gradually turned cold, and her killing intent appeared frequently. If you want to touch Brother Suyu, you must first get past me. Qin Xianer shouted softly as she stood in front of Suyu. At the most critical moment, 2 powerful enemies had actually appeared. Their bodies exuded an aura that caused one's heart to palpitate. It wasn't all creations. It was an even more powerful force. Xianer, move aside. You're not their match. Suyu sighed. If he was given half a cup of tea's time, he should be able to refine the last half of the cultivation deity's bloodline and improve his cultivation to the 4th stage of the mortal fairy. But now, it seemed that he had no choice but to stop. Because they are the ghost prison's great emperor. Suyu said coldly. Tian Yu was taken aback. Her eyes were filled with murderous intent. Tian Rinyao, on the other hand, was calm and unruffled. He only revealed a surprised expression. So Brother Su already guessed it. Xian Er's eyes widened, and she sucked in a breath of cold air. Ghost Prison's great emperor? After coming to 9 regions for so long, how could she not know the name of the great emperor of Ghost Prison? Back then, he was second only to Shinichen. His martial prowess was unparalleled, and he unified the world of ghosts and souls. Ghost Prison's great emperor, Tian Rinyao and Tian Yu smiled at the same time. The two of them gradually approached each other, and their bodies actually fused into one. The front was Tian Rinyao, and the back was Tian Yu. The two of them were twins. I'm very curious. How did you guess my true identity? Tian Rinyao and Tian Yu spoke at the same time. Their voices were a mixture of male and female voices, and it was impossible to tell whether they were male or female. Suyu hurried to refine it as he asked, "Is it that hard to guess?" Even an outstanding person like Bai Ling Tian follows your lead. The entire ghost army of 9 regions also listens to your orders. Who else could you be except the Ghost Prison's great emperor? Secondly, you are a man, but you like men. Tian Yu is a woman, but she likes women. Yin and Yang are mixed up, and there is no distinction between men and women. I happen to be well versed in many ancient books. I know that 100 years ago, the Ghost Prison's great emperor spoke in a male and a female voice, so I guessed it. Now that you can come in front of me without being noticed, your strength is profound and extraordinary. It's just to confirm the guess in my heart. Swoosh! The sound of space shattering suddenly resounded in the secret room. A figure in a royal robe, emitting a dazzling golden light, teleported out. Aunt, I have to admit that you are very smart. The Central Prefecture's king had arrived. When Suyu was only a hair's breadth away, he finally arrived. He still lost by a small margin. You can even guess his identity. I really don't know what else you don't know. The Central Prefecture's king seemed to be praising, but more like mocking. The more a dying person knows, the more ironic it is. Looking sideways at the ghost prison's great emperor, the central prefecture's king said, "Well done, otherwise if he breaks through the realm of the mortal fairy, it will be troublesome." The ghost prison's great emperor didn't care. "If you die, it will do me no good." Staring at Suyu, the ghost prison's great emperor smiled. "You might as well guess again. What am I going to do to you next?" With a flash of cold light, the ghost prison's great emperor teleported in front of Suyu, and a palm containing the boundless power of the mortal fairy pressed toward Suyu's head. The central prefecture's king frowned, but did not stop it. In the end, this man was going to die, and it didn't matter who killed him, as long as the divine nine-dragon cauldron was not exposed. However, he suddenly found that Suyu not only did not resist, but a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "I guess you'll help me." "Ha ha ha, that's right." The ghost prison's great emperor changed his murderous intent and laughed. The power of the mortal fairy in his palm suddenly turned into a group of divine power and entered Suyu's body. "This is the blood of the emperor's descendants. Enjoy it." "He is also a descendant of the gods, a descendant of the gods." "Pah!" With the help of the blood of the ghost prison's great emperor, Suyu's refining speed soared unprecedentedly, and his cultivation was like a flood opening the gate, rushing endlessly. The sudden scene, not only did Sienna not react, but even the central prefecture's king was stunned for a moment. When he recovered, the central prefecture's king teleported over and slapped Suyu's head, while shouting, "Ghost prison's great emperor! You are crazy." Qin Xian'er's betrayal he could understand, but the betrayal of the ghost prison's great emperor he could never understand. What good would it do for the ghost prison's great emperor to help Suyu destroy him? No, it was only bad. As the ghost race that ravaged Jiuzhou 100 years ago, after Suyu killed the central prefecture's king, would he let go of the ghost prison's great emperor? In any case, he couldn't figure out the motives of the ghost prison's great emperor. Ha ha ha. The ghost prison's great emperor laughed and raised his hand. 8 yellow beads were arranged in front of his chest in order to form a ring. That is the underworld pearl, the famous magic weapon of the ghost prison's great emperor. The central prefecture's king slapped, and the 8 underworld pearls rotated like meteors. Under the high speed, not only did they remove the power of the central prefecture's king, but they also rubbed his palm with the momentum of high-speed rotation, revealing the bloody arm bones. This scene stunned Suyu. Could the underworld pearl be used in this way? "Brother Su, when I learned that you threw my famous magic weapon as a stone, do you know how I felt?" The ghost prison's great emperor turned the underworld pearl and laughed. Suyu blushed, rolled his eyes, and ignored him. He seized the time to refine the blood of the cultivation deity. The central prefecture's king's arm shook, and the injury quickly recovered. His face was full of indignation. "Ghost prison's great emperor, do you really want to ruin my big plan?" "Big plan? Ha ha ha. Occupy the Jiuzhou continent, refine it, and sell it to a god in exchange for a quasi-god's celestial energy sphere?" The ghost prison's great emperor revealed his true intentions. To become the emperor of Jiuzhou, the central prefecture's king had already done it. As early as 100 years ago, after the fall of Shinichen, he was invincible. So what if he became the emperor? He had a deeper purpose, to sell the Jiuzhou continent. It sounded really unbelievable. A complete cavern world without the protection of the gods is indeed a piece of fat meat that everyone covets. The ghost prison's great emperor did not care about the increasingly pale face of the central prefecture's king. "You are looking for death." The central prefecture's king's killing intent rose, and he shouted, "Get out of here!" He exerted all his strength and concentrated all the mortal fairy's power to punch out, trying to destroy the ghost prison's great emperor and Suyu together. The ghost prison's great emperor's face suddenly became dignified, and he controlled the 8 underworld pearls to constantly remove the power that made him feel pressured. Fortunately, the central prefecture's king was injured and could not exert his full strength. In addition, the power of the Underworld Pearl is extraordinary and it blocked this blow. Even so, the 8 Underworld Pearls have serious scratches on the body surface, causing the Ghost Prison's great emperor to sigh with regret, but also caused a surprise. 100 years ago, you had the strength comparable to Shinichen. 100 years later, your strength has risen again. The Central Prefecture's king has no time to pay attention to the nonsense of the Ghost Prison's great emperor. If he doesn't get rid of Suyu as soon as possible, he will be the one who will be killed. You're the one who forced me to do this. I didn't want to kill you because we worked together 100 years ago, but now, even if ghosts and gods come to question me, I'm not afraid. The Central Prefecture's king looked ferocious. He took a deep breath, and the demon god's power surged in his body. Finally, the Ghost Prison's great emperor's face changed, and he said in surprise, "The power of demon god, you are not a human." Even though they had cooperated for 100 years, he didn't know that the Central Prefecture's king, a human, was not a human. No, it should be said that he was not a pure human. Be careful. He is the descendant of a human god and a demon god, and he is performing the human-demon transformation. Su Yu's mood was extremely grave. In terms of cultivation alone, the Central Prefecture's king was invincible in the world. With the help of the human-demon transformation, he was even more terrifying than the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Even if the 8 prefectures' kings gathered together, they would still be no match for him. Human-demon transformation? The knowledge of the Ghost Prison's great emperor is naturally not a trivial matter. How could he not know this famous trick? The descendant of a human god and a demon god has a unique skill that can be transformed between human and demon, thereby obtaining a higher level of power. Today's Central Prefecture's king is already at the peak of the mortal fairy. If he goes up another level, wouldn't he reach the realm of gods? Die. The Central Prefecture's king, who has transformed into 1,000 feet demon body, swallowed the demonic energy in his mouth, roared, and the mountain-like demon body slammed down. The Ghost Prison's great emperor gritted his teeth, unwilling to admit defeat, and his body instantly expanded 100 times, reaching a giant of 1,000 feet. The 8 underworld pearls also expanded, each becoming 100 feet in size, spinning rapidly to resist the palm of the Central Prefecture's king. This palm directly smashed the 8 underworld pearls, and the remaining power of the demonic palm slammed into the body of the Ghost Prison's great emperor. The Ghost Prison's great emperor gritted his teeth and spat out a mouthful of ghost energy. His palms turned into 10 feet of ghost claws and grabbed the remaining power of the attack. The two collided, and the Ghost Prison's great emperor retreated again and again. The huge body collapsed the underground chamber, and the ruins on the ground were also overturned by the 2 behemoths. Chapter 1114. Devil Clan, Ghost Clan, they are fighting! The same thought flashed through everyone's mind. In the impression of the Juzhou humans, both were terrible and ferocious existences, but they suddenly appeared in the Central Prefecture and were fighting each other. However, judging from the result, the Ghost Clan was obviously at a disadvantage. Die. The Central Prefecture's king roared and attacked with all his strength again. How could the Ghost Clan's great emperor fight back after losing the Underworld Pearl? He immediately shouted, "Where is the Ghost Realm army?" Chi, chi, chi. From below the ruins, a huge black cloud suddenly rose. Eerie ghost cries came from the cloud, and the figures of the Ghost Clan could be vaguely seen. Kill! In the ghost cloud, Bai Ling Tian pointed at the Central Prefecture's king below. Suddenly, the huge ghost cloud shone down like the sky was collapsing. At the same time, each of the Ghost Clan in the cloud held a piece of black chain, and all of their chains were tightly connected. The ghost cloud shrouded, accompanied by the sound of chains colliding. The chains wrapped around the Central Prefecture's king. It looked like they were going to lock the Central Prefecture's king alive. These chains were made of special materials in the ghost realm, known as the first divine wood in the ghost realm, and were strong and indestructible. Sensing the existence of the chains, the Central Prefecture's king was furious. Ghost! Prison! Big! Emperor! These chains were made for me. Such a chain was obviously prepared to lock up a mortal fairy. In this way, the resources he had been secretly helping the Ghost Realm army for 100 years were all used to support the enemy in the end. Thinking of this, the Central Prefecture's king was furious. He was betrayed for 100 years and helped the enemy without knowing it. Go to hell! The Ghost Clan's great emperor roared and hit the sky with his palms. Suddenly, the whole ghost cloud was blown away, and the Ghost Clan suffered countless casualties. This blow killed more than half of the Ghost Realm army. The Ghost Clan's great emperor was in pain. These were the elites of the Ghost Clan, but they died under the Central Prefecture's king's punch. Fortunately, the chains were successfully attached to the Central Prefecture's king, and his hands were bound. Kill! In the remaining ghost cloud, Bai Lingtian's command sounded again. Suddenly, many long spears filled with dense ghost qi condensed in the ghost clouds. They were filled with extremely dense ghost qi. Su Yu recognized it at first glance. Isn't this the extreme evil ghost energy in Mo Tianquan's body? This ghostly qi belonged to the ghost prison's great emperor. In other words, these ghostly qi spears were all refined by the ghost prison's great emperor one by one, and it took him no less than a few decades to do so. In order to kill the Central Prefecture's king, the ghost realm really spared no effort. Roar! With an earth-shattering roar of pain, thousands upon thousands of spears condensed from extreme evil ghost qi stabbed into his body. Once it pierced through, the entire spear turned into extremely evil ghost energy and surged into the body of the Central Prefecture's king, wreaking havoc in his body. Even the Central Prefecture's king, who had transformed into a demonic body, was in great pain. But it was precisely because of the pain that the Central Prefecture's king's demonic nature was aroused. His eyes became more and more blood-red, and an ominous glint surged into the sky. He looked up to the sky and let out a roar that shook the 9 regions. All of you deserve to die! Bang! An earth-shattering explosion was heard. His arms kept colliding, and the veins on his face twisted. As he struggled with all his might, the chains broke inch by inch, turning into countless shards that shot into the sky. Ah! In an instant, countless screams rang out. All the ghosts that were struck by the chains had their bodies smashed into smithereens. Even their souls couldn't escape in time. In just a few breaths, the remaining ghost clouds in the sky were less than 1/10 of the original. A full 90%. Tens of thousands of ghost elites were killed. The ghost prison's great emperor had no time to feel distressed. Without saying anything, he turned around and grabbed Su Yu and Qin Xianer and immediately chose to escape. It was a mistake. No one knew that the Central Prefecture's king had hidden his identity as a descendant of a human god and the demon god, causing decades of preparation to be in vain. However, the Central Prefecture's king hated the betrayal of the ghost prison's great emperor. How could he give him a chance to escape? Demonic origin ripple. The Central Prefecture's king roared, stretched out his palm, and pointed to the ghost prison's great emperor. From the palm of his hand, a dark halo appeared, and layers of runes appeared on the surface of the halo. With a roar, the halo hit the ghost prison's great emperor with the momentum of teleportation. The ghost prison's great emperor was shocked. He could perceive that this halo was enough to destroy his body and soul. Mo Tianquan, what are you waiting for? At the critical moment, the ghost prison's great emperor shouted. Su Yu listened and was not surprised. He sighed. This woman really has a far-reaching plan. Swish! Suddenly, from the underground of the Central Prefecture's palace, a very bright beam of light, 100 feet thick, spurted out. The beam of light happened to be under the feet of the Central Prefecture's king. In that beam of light, There is a strong power of the mortal fairy, and it is far more than the power of the mortal fairy. If it is guarded against, even if the mortal fairies of Jojo gather, they may not be able to do anything to the Central Prefecture's king. However, the Central Prefecture's king was caught off guard and was hit head-on. His body was immediately smashed. The huge demon body was broken everywhere, his legs were badly mutilated, and the bones of his legs were visible. There were cracks in his chest, and internal organs were clearly visible. Half of his head was beaten off, half of it was a human face, and the other half was a skeleton. His dark and messy hair covered a small half of his face, and a blood-red demon eye pierced through the black hair, which looked more gloomy and terrible. At this moment, the Central Prefecture's king did not have half of the spirit of a human state king, and he was already a ferocious demon. Emotianxian. With a roar, the Central Prefecture's king's huge demon foot suddenly stepped down. Rumble. Hearing the loud sound of the earth, the whole central continent felt this sudden, great shock. Under this foot, the ruins of the Central Prefecture city were swept in all directions by the powerful shock wave. With the right foot of the Central Prefecture's king as the center, the area within a radius of 100,000 miles was collapsed. The soil on the earth was shaken up, revealing the extremely hard crust. Now it could be clearly seen that there was a dark hole of 100 feet on the edge of the right foot of the Central Prefecture's king, which was filled with deep ghost energy. Anyone who had been to the Red Blood Palace to investigate the sudden arrival of the Ghost Clan army could recognize that the ghost cave under the Central Prefecture city was similar to the ghost cave under the Red Blood Palace. To be precise, the two were connected. All the people of the Red Blood Palace were missing, and no bones were left. They didn't disappear, but they entered the huge ghost cave. Along the underground tunnel, they crossed half of the central continent and quietly lurked under the Central Prefecture city, ready to give the Central Prefecture's king a fatal blow at any time. Swish! A woman in a black dress flew out of the cave with a cold and arrogant face. She was Emo Tianxian, who had been missing for a long time. A dignified human colluded with the Ghost Clan. The Central Prefecture's king stared at Emo Tianxian coldly with his blood-red demon eye. Emo Tianxian did not care, but said, as a descendant of the demon clan who is ready to sell the Jojo continent, "Do you have the right to say that to me?" All the strong human beings were stunned. The Red Blood Palace of the Blessed and Heavenly Lands colluded with the Ghost Clan? Qin Siener said in disbelief, "I'm confused. When did the Red Blood Palace ally with the Ghost Clan?" Su Yu said with a faint smile, 100 years ago. Ah, 100 years ago? Wasn't 100 years ago the most tragic time of the war between humans and ghosts? Qin Siener was confused. Su Yu said, "It was indeed tragic, but because it was tragic, no one suspected it. Even the Central Prefecture's king did not expect the betrayal of the ghost prison's great emperor. But it is absolutely true that the Central Prefecture's king and the ghost prison's great emperor allied 100 years ago and killed the emperor of Juzhou, Shinichen. Is it necessary to make such a great sacrifice to gain the Central Prefecture's king's trust? Also, countless strong human beings were sacrificed at that time." Qin Siener said in confusion. Su Yu touched the 9-jade spiritual pearl on his arm. A dog bone with 100 characters printed on it and a crystal ball appeared in Su Yu's palm. Su Yu inserted the dog bone into the crystal ball, and the crystal ball broke. A trace of breath gradually flowed out from the crystal ball. Yes, a very familiar breath. "Lord Sacred Kylin, you can explain it to me," Su Yu said with a faint smile. "Shinichen? Sacred Kylin?" Qin Siener's little mouth opened wide. She had heard of both, but the former had been dead for 100 years, and the latter had been dead for about 10,000 years. Ahem. What scared Qin Siener was that someone in the crystal ball said, "Well, Su Yu, it's not fun if you are so smart. I, Kylin, am going to give you a surprise." With a crisp sound, the crystal ball cracked open like an eggshell. A small, purple Kylan broke out of the crystal ball. It was about the size of a palm, and it was exquisite and cute. It did not look like the mighty and domineering, mysterious, heavenly divine pavilion at all. However, that breath was sacred Kylan's. Su Yu accelerated the refining of the bloodline of the cultivation deity and said with a faint smile, "You are indeed a cunning dog, Kylan. Even before you die, you left a trace of great path divine source origin, sealed in the crystal ball, and lied to me that you can randomly choose a fairy artifact from the crystal ball. You are really something." When the dead dog gave this crystal ball to Su Yu alone, Su Yu felt that it was unusual, so he did not open it for a long time. Who could have thought that sacred Kylan, who should have died in the space of the 100th floor of the Marshall Tower, was still alive? In the crystal ball, there was a trace of great path divine source origin left by it. This was a clone left by sacred Kylan in the world. If it grew up, it might be able to return to the peak of its cultivation. In this way, there was a possibility of continuation. Hey, there's no other way, is there? If this was a useless crystal ball, you would have thrown it into the latrine. Sacred Kylan laughed without any shame. Su Yu rolled his eyes at him and said, "It seems that the time for me to summon you is not wrong. The Jiuzhou continent is about to be sold. If I don't summon you now, I am afraid there will be no chance." Hearing this, the small sacred Kylan squatted on the broken eggshell and stared at the central prefecture's king with its nostrils, with a face of contempt and disdain. "A bastard of a human and a demon wants to sell my cave? After 100 years of planning, it is time to close the net." The ghost prison's great emperor, who was tired of dealing with the waves of great path demon source, saw sacred Kylan and could not help but show great joy. "Senior Shinichen, no, God Kylan, save me." Chapter 11:15. The sacred Kylan twitched its mouth. With only a strand of celestial energy sphere left, it was like a newborn baby. Its combat power was even lower than that of the wild demons. How could it resist the demonic energy sphere? If it didn't make a move, someone else would. Boom! Suddenly, a bone-chilling white sword light shot out from the ghost cave. The sword was so sharp that it could cut everything into pieces. Crack! The demonic energy sphere was divided into 2 parts by the sword light and flew out from both sides of the ghost prison's great emperor. A white-robed woman appeared in the ghost cave as well. Her features were picturesque, and her features were beautiful. At first glance, she actually resembled Bing Wuxin. However, she was more mature, beautiful, graceful, and noble than Bing Wuxin. She was the prefecture king of the lifeless sword prefecture, Jian Wuxing. That beam of light just now contained the power of her sword. "I am Jian Wuxing, the broken sword god Kylan. Thank you for your guidance 100 years ago. Today, I am willing to eliminate the evil for you." Jian Wuxing bowed to the sacred Kylan with her sword. The sacred Kylan nodded with satisfaction. "I am very satisfied that you still remember your promise 100 years ago. 100 years ago, the proud sword Venerable returned from the glittering jewel wonderland and made great progress. She broke through the barrier and became a mortal fairy. Some people said she had obtained a great opportunity in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, so she could become a mortal fairy. However, no one knew what kind of opportunity it was. Only Jian Wuxing knew that she was enlightened by the black dog that the sacred Kylan had transformed into. Another prefecture king? The central prefecture's king snorted as he glanced at Jian Wuxing disdainfully. Then he stared at the sacred Kylan and said, "You have a familiar aura." The sacred Kylan lifted its neck and said with a sneer, "My good apprentice, have you forgotten your master so quickly?" With a flash of purple light, the sacred Kylan turned into a human. It was an ordinary-looking old man. He looked so ordinary that no one would take a second look at him in the crowd. However, many people in the area were shocked. "Lord Shenichen." "Impossible. Is that the Jojo Emperor Shinichen? How could this be? Didn't Lord Shinichen die a long time ago? Only Suyu let out a sigh of relief and said a name that he had almost forgotten. Long time no see, old housekeeper? Suyu sighed. The old housekeeper, Fan Haishing, was an old man transformed from the remnant soul of Shinichen. Now, of Shinichen had reappeared in the Jojo continent. The pupils of the central prefecture's king contracted fiercely. His face was filled with shock, bewilderment, and confusion. He said, "It's really you, Shinichen." The sacred Kylin of Shen-Ichen. No, Shin of God of Lin of king of the king of the world. Since I perished, there have been many extraterrestrial forces trying to take over my cavern world. Fortunately, I made a lot of friends when I was alive. With their protection, no one dared to take over my cavern world for a while. Until hundreds of years ago, a friend told me that a member of the world of divine remains had sneaked into my cavern world and was ready to seize this world. Therefore, I transformed into Shinichen and was ready to unify the 9 regions. I just wanted to see who the person behind the scenes was. If he wanted to sell the 9 regions, he had to at least unify the 9 regions. It could be imagined that if Shinichen unified the 9 states, the members of the world of divine remains would definitely sabotage it. I thought that person would be the most mysterious Duanxian cliff master, so I was always on guard against him. I never thought that he would be my disciple, you. The sacred Kylin had a complicated look in its eyes, and it was full of emotion. You hid yourself so well, and your aptitude is so top-notch. If you hadn't exposed yourself in advance, I would have handed the 9 states over to you. Unfortunately, even I didn't expect that the disciple I took in because I valued talent was a member of the world of divine remains. In fact, the sacred Kylin could not be blamed. When it suddenly heard that someone had come to seize the cavern world, the suspect must be a strong person with such ability. At that time, the severed fairy cliff master had just come to the 9 states, and his strength was extraordinary. Naturally, he was regarded as a suspect. The central prefecture's king took a deep breath and said, "So the so-called war between humans and ghosts was actually a chaotic situation arranged by you?" "Yes," the sacred Kirin said. "If I didn't create an opportunity for you, would you have attacked me?" The central prefecture's king thought about it carefully and shook his head. No. With the strength of the Jojo Emperor at that time, he would never have attacked unless it was necessary. Falling into the situation of fighting with the ghost prison's great emperor was the best time for him to attack. "You are so calculative." The central prefecture's king took a breath and felt a sense of admiration. Who could have expected that the tragic war between humans and ghosts was actually arranged by Shinichen, and the purpose was to draw out the mastermind behind the scenes? The sacred Kylin smiled and said, "Others also praised me like this." "So, you planned for 100 years? The central prefecture's king said. The sacred Kylin nodded proudly. "Hey, of course, I am a dead god after all. The strength of the remaining celestial source origin is weak. If I appeared rashly, I would only be caught by you. Therefore, when I found out your hidden strength, I pretended to escape into the small cavern world that I created, the Jinlong continent, to give you the illusion that Shinichen was lingering on. In fact, in the past 100 years, I have been planning in the Jujo continent with the purpose of training enough experts to kill you one day. Unfortunately, the luck of the Jujo continent declined, and there was no one who could master the celestial destroying arrow for a long time. Therefore, I made several other arrangements. First, I made the Ghost Clan continue to pretend to ally with you, deceive you into trusting me, and give you a fatal blow at the critical time. Second, I looked for suitable helpers. At the end of his words, he looked at Mo Tianxian thoughtfully. Now it seems that everything is as expected. After 100 years, a sword genius like Jian Wuxing was born, and she became a powerful helper. The Ghost Clan also protected the celestial destroying arrow and Su Yu at the critical time. After hearing that, Su Yu and Qin Xianer couldn't speak for a long time. It turned out that the Jinlong continent they lived in was actually a small cavern world created by the sacred Kailan. Its destruction originated from a plot and conspiracy that had been planned for 100 years. Everything that the sacred Kailan did was to cultivate strong people and forces to fight against the Central Prefecture's king, who was a member of the world of divine remains. As for why he didn't cultivate the rest of the prefecture's kings, maybe he was afraid that the news would be leaked. It was hard to tell what was in a man's heart. A dead deity couldn't deter these prefecture's kings. It was impossible to predict whether they would secretly collude with the Central Prefecture's king to kill the remaining celestial energy sphere of the sacred Kailan. Therefore, he was so cautious and waited for 100 years. Is this the situation you are waiting for? After hearing that, the Central Prefecture's king sneered with pity. A group of mobs! Do you expect them to protect Su Yu and the celestial destroying arrow? After saying that, the Central Prefecture's king punched out. This punch covered all the strong people in all directions. It was a punch, but it hit everyone at the same time. Of course, Su Yu was the key target. Seeing that, the Ghost Clan's great emperor changed his face slightly. Then he grabbed Su Yu and Qin Xianer and kept retreating. Seeing that, the little Kailan jumped onto Su Yu's shoulder and was taken away by the Central Prefecture's king. As for Jian Wuxing, she easily shattered the fist energy with a sweep of her sword. Her body just shook a few times. The most shocking thing was that Mo Tianxian took out the flying guillotine casually, circled around her, and easily dispersed the fist force. She stood motionless on the spot, and a trace of the mortal fairy's strength lingered around her. The mortal fairy's strength? Haven't you been infected by the extreme evil ghost energy? Haven't you been looking for a way to get rid of it all over the world? The Central Prefecture's king was slightly surprised, but his voice stopped abruptly. Since Mo Tianxian and the Ghost Clan's great emperor conspired to put on a big show 100 years ago, how could Mo Tianxian really be hurt? Maybe the extreme evil ghost energy left in her body was used to confuse him and make him relax his vigilance. Everyone knew that Mo Tianxuan's cultivation stayed at the peak of the all-creations realm because of the extreme evil ghost energy. She couldn't take a step forward, and she was looking for a way to get rid of it. Otherwise, the Central Prefecture's king, who was very close to her, would not relax his vigilance against her. He didn't even know that she had dug a ghost cave under the Central Prefecture's imperial palace in 100 years. You hid your strength really well. You would rather be injured by my projection than expose your strength, the Central Prefecture's king said coldly. When Mo Tianxian hunted down the 5 Golden Light Guards, they used the Central Prefecture's token to summon the projection of the Central Prefecture's king. Mo Tianxian would rather be injured and her life threatened than expose her cultivation. Her forbearance was amazing. Hearing that, Mo Tianxian snorted slightly and couldn't help but glance at Su Yu. Cold sweat appeared on Su Yu's forehead, and he felt guilty. At that time, he not only molested her unintentionally, but also sold her fairy artifact, the flying guillotine. Now he thought about it. Fortunately, she really fainted. Cut the crap. It's time to put an end to the century-old hatred. Mo Tianxian frowned and started to attack. Like a black ghost, the flying guillotine teleported to the top of the Central Prefecture's king's head and scratched his head. With a dull sound, the top of the Central Prefecture's king's head was scratched. At the same time, Jian Wuxing waved her sword with great tacit understanding. Sword Technique Universe. There were 3 realms of the sword doctrine. Sword moves at your will, undying sword body, and the last realm was the ultimate realm of the sword doctrine, Sword Technique Universe. When the sword was waved, endless sword lights appeared in the sky and the earth and penetrated the top of the Central Prefecture's king's head. The endless sword lights entered the Central Prefecture's king's body and destroyed everything inside it crazily. However, the Central Prefecture's king just snorted coldly. Then he smashed his head with his palm. At the same time, he grabbed all the sword energy in his head with his demonic claw. The Central Prefecture's king, who only had half of his head left, was unscathed. Then he patted both of his palms, which were stained with blood. Mo Tianxian and Jian Wuxing tried their best to resist the boundless demonic claw. Jian Wuxing performed the ultimate sword doctrine again to resist the power of the demonic claw. Chapter 11:16. This palm was powerful enough to destroy Jian Wuxing's body and soul. At this critical moment, Jian Wuxing spat out a mouthful of blood, which stained the long sword in her hand. Then she shouted in a low voice, "Shifting shadows!" Instantly, the demonic palm arrived. However, the blood-stained sword was smashed into pieces by the demonic palm. Not far away, Jian Wuxing's figure flashed, and her figure staggered as she appeared. Her face was pale. The Central Prefecture's king was too powerful to be defeated by ordinary forces. "Palace Master Mo, it's up to you now." The other demonic palm landed on Mo Tianquan's body successfully. Then the Central Prefecture's king said with a hideous smile, "A bunch of mobs! Do you really want to kill me?" However, his expression suddenly changed, and he could not help but look at the other demonic palm. He did land on Mo Tianquan's body, but he didn't smash it into pieces. Then Mo Tianxian took out a beautiful cyan sword from her sleeve and pointed it at the center of the demonic palm. The sword seemed to be launched casually, but it managed to block the demonic palm. "A bunch of mobs? I don't like this word." Mo Tianxian turned over her palm, and the cyan sword flew across the demonic palm. Instantly, the entire demonic palm was cut into two parts, leaving a smooth cut. How could she use swordsmanship? Apart from Suyu, all the people present were shocked by what he had just witnessed. Suyu had seen Mo Tianquan's undying sword body in the martial tower, so he knew she was a hidden swordsman. "Master." A voice that very few people could hear entered Suyu's ears. Suyu was shocked. Then he looked sideways and was surprised. Jian Wuxing, who had retreated to one side, was looking at the valiant Mo Tianxian from afar with reverence. Could it be that Jian Wuxing, who had enlightened the world with her swordsmanship, got her swordsmanship from Mo Tianxian? If so, how powerful was Mo Tianquan's swordsmanship? The Central Prefecture's king was stunned. Then he stared at the cyan sword in Jian Wuxing's hand in horror. It was definitely an ordinary low-grade fairy artifact. However, how could its power be more powerful than the third realm of swordsmanship, the sword world? A sense of danger entered the Central Prefecture's king's heart. Suddenly, the Central Prefecture's king revealed a look of disbelief and said in surprise, Could it be that you are a descendant of the sword god's bloodline, and you are innately proficient in the divine-level sword spirit?" The god-level sword intent was a general concept. It was the sword god's sword intent, and it wasn't something the so-called three realms of the sword Tao could compare to. Mo Tianxian said calmly, "You don't have to know that." Chila! With another strike of the sword, the Central Prefecture's king's arm, which was more than 500 feet long, was chopped off. A trace of panic finally appeared on the face of the Central Prefecture's king, and he said furiously, "So what if you are the descendant of the sword god? Those who stand in my way will be killed." Saint Demon burns the heavens. The Central Prefecture's king roared. His whole body was covered with layers of golden flames. That was the divine tribulation fire. Even the peak mortal fairies would have to avoid it. As expected, Mo Tianxian frowned and retreated. She was rather fearful of the boundless divine fire. However, Mo Tianxian had never been one to bow her head. She snorted coldly and advanced with her sword. Sword connecting divinity realm. Chi! A strand of sword intent that didn't belong to the mortal world rushed out from the sword abruptly. Mo Tianxian and her sword split the raging divine fire and penetrated the body of the Central Prefecture's king like light and shadow. With a painful roar, the Central Prefecture's king kept growing out of his body one after another, as if there were countless swords growing out of his body, especially the sword in his chest, which pierced through his heart and came out of his chest. Moreover, the longer the swords grew, the weaker the vitality of the Central Prefecture's king became. When the body of the Central Prefecture's king was covered by hundreds of thousands of swords, the body of the Central Prefecture's king could no longer be seen. Only the dense and endless swords could be seen. The aura of the Central Prefecture's king also dissipated abruptly, along with his soul. The whole area was in dead silence. The Central Prefecture's king, the most powerful demon on the continent, was killed by a single strike of the sword just like that. The onlookers looked at Mo Tianxian as if they were looking at a terrible goddess of war. Who in the world could resist this strike of the sword? Frame, the small cyan sword in Mo Tianxian's hand, fell to the ground. Her hand, which was holding the small sword, trembled unceasingly. A meandering stream of blood flowed down along her arm. The onlookers were shocked. When they fixed their eyes on Mo Tianxian, they found there was a huge bloody hole in her chest, from which the divine fire was still burning. She killed the Central Prefecture's king, but she was also seriously injured by the divine fire. Not only her flesh and blood were burned, but her soul was also injured. She couldn't even lift up her sword, let alone launch another strike like this. Master! Jian Wuxing rushed over and held Mo Tianxian, who was about to fall to the ground. She said anxiously, Master, why did you force yourself to use this move? This is a move that injures the enemy, but also injures yourself. It was more than just injuring herself. She almost died together with her enemy, even if the divine fire didn't injure her. This move had exhausted all of her strength. Humph! I don't need you to tell me what to do. Mo Tianxian snorted, but she had no strength left in her body. After a long time, the ghost prison's great emperor broke the silence. Looking at the miserable death of the Central Prefecture's king, he said with relief, after staying dormant for 100 years, You finally killed the demon. Congratulations, God Kylan. The god Kylan also had a complicated expression on his face. He felt relaxed and a little bit regretful. Why was such an outstanding person a member of the world of divine remains? What a pity! The onlookers gradually felt relaxed. The demon was dead, and the shadow that had covered the Jojo continent for 100 years could disappear. However, among all the onlookers, only Suyu was frowning. Although the Central Prefecture's king was dead, the depression brought by his ordeal of human didn't disappear. Instead, it became more and more serious. He couldn't help but remind them, Don't be careless. After all, he is the Central Prefecture's king. Before confirming it, we must be careful. However, before he finished his words, the numerous swords penetrated the demon's body, which looked like a hedgehog, and a strong golden light burst out from inside to outside. The golden light contained a very familiar aura. The glittering jewel demonic god's celestial energy sphere. Suyu and the sacred Kylan said at the same time. Both of their faces suddenly became serious and extremely ugly. Could it be that he had signed a contract with the glittering jewel demonic god? Ha ha! As the demon's body broke out into wild laughter, everyone's heart sank. The ghost prison's great emperor was shocked. He has been resurrected. Could it be that he has a contract with a god? He was no stranger to this contract, and neither was Suyu. In the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, the demon-devouring emperor was willing to be a slave of the glittering jewel mortal fairy and obtain the contract of the glittering jewel mortal fairy. Unless the glittering jewel mortal fairy's celestial energy sphere was exhausted, she was almost immortal. No matter how many times she was killed, she could be resurrected on the spot. With the cultivation of the Central Prefecture's king, the celestial energy sphere, consumed by one resurrection, was a huge burden that the glittering jewel mortal fairy couldn't bear. Presumably, the glittering jewel mortal fairy would never allow him to continue to consume his celestial energy sphere. Sure enough, a circle of light flashed between the eyebrows of the Central Prefecture's king. Ha ha ha! That stupid woman thought she could use me. She didn't know that I was using her. I took half of her celestial energy sphere and resurrected her. She must be mad now, right? The demon laughed up to the sky, and hundreds of thousands of swords grew out of his body. With a light shout, they were shaken away, and the body of the Central Prefecture's king was revealed. When they saw his body, the hearts of everyone present sank fiercely, and they practically sank to the bottom of the valley. The Central Prefecture's king was not only resurrected, but also his injuries were healed by the celestial energy sphere. The death airflow in his body, the body that was smashed by the light beam, the head that was smashed, and the arm that was cut off were all healed. The Central Prefecture's king reappeared in front of them in his heyday. At this moment, even Suyu felt desperate. Fight! The ghost prison's great emperor gritted his teeth, put down Suyu and Qin Xianer, and shouted. He sacrificed the 8 underworld pearls that he had found, lined them up in a circle, and took the initiative to attack. Jian Wuxing also gritted her teeth, put down the seriously injured Mo Tianqian, and rushed up with her sword. The remaining ghost forces condensed into a large mass of ghost clouds and rushed up again, with chains and extremely evil ghost spears. Even if they knew it was hopeless, they still wanted to stop him. The Central Prefecture's king sneered as if he was watching a group of ants rushing towards him. A motley crew! The Central Prefecture's king stretched out 2 giant demon palms, each of which condensed a divine fire, and shot it at the ghost prison's great emperor and Jian Wuxing. The 2 great mortal fairies also rushed up, gnashing their teeth. However, in the face of absolute power, their magical powers and precious skills were like ants trying to shake a tree. A mass of divine fire bombarded the 8 underworld pearls. The revolving underworld pearls could not bear the terrible power of the divine fire and were burned and cracked. The 8 underworld pearls were burned and cracked, one by one. The remaining 20% of the divine fire turned into a sharp arrow and penetrated the chest of the ghost prison's great emperor. With a scream, the ghost prison's great emperor was covered with golden flames and became a burning man. If he didn't use the extremely evil ghost energy to force the divine fire out of his body little by little, he would have been turned into ashes at this moment. Jian Wuxing was not much better. She had lost her celestial sword, so she could only use her fingers to replace the sword and condense the supreme sword essence. World of sword art! In an instant, the infinite sword light cut toward the divine fire. However, the sword light was quickly buried in the divine fire like a moth flying into the fire. The remaining divine fire burned Jian Wuxing directly. She didn't have the extremely evil ghost energy to resist the divine fire like the ghost prison's great emperor, so her body was burned. Fortunately, her soul left her body and escaped in time. Between the 2 great mortal fairies, one was seriously injured, and the other's body was broken. This was the power of the Central Prefecture's king in his peak state. Mo Tianqian might not be able to hurt him even if she used the divine sword realm again. The Central Prefecture's king sneered. 100 years of planning? 100 years of planning? Ha ha ha, it's just a joke. Mo Tianqian gritted her teeth. Damn the deity contract! 100 years of planning failed in a single move. Mo Tianqian was seriously injured. The ghost prison's great emperor was seriously injured, and Jian Wuxing only had her soul left. In this world, who could stop the Central Prefecture's king? Chapter 11:17. The unstoppable tribulation fire was about to annihilate all of them. Suddenly, a rich power of the 5 elements traversed across the void from the distant horizon. A colorful mountain flew out of the huge crack in the void and flew toward this place at high speed. Before the mountain arrived, the power of the 5 elements contained in the mountain had already arrived. It condensed into a tornado and swept the divine fire that was attacking the sacred Kirin and the others into the clouds. The Central Prefecture's king turned around coldly and sneered, "There are still people who don't know the difference between life and death to stop me." Looking at the foot of the 5 elements mountain, there were 2 figures, one in black and the other in white. They exerted the strength of the mortal fairies to carry the 5 elements mountain across the void. Swish! The next moment, they flew to the sacred Kylin and put the mountain down. Then, they activated the spell formation at the foot of the mountain. The spell formation was infused with the remaining power of the demon god in their bodies. The spell formation absorbed the force of the 5 elements mountain to protect the sacred Kylin and the others. Black and white mortal fairies. Emo Tianxian was surprised. The Eastern continent had always been peaceful and mysterious. Why did they get involved in the dispute between them and the Central Prefecture's king? Couldn't they see the situation clearly? Even with their help, they couldn't hold on for a long time. The black and white mortal fairies didn't look back. They stared at the Central Prefecture's king and said resolutely, "As the king of the Jojo continent, how can you ignore the demon clan?" After settling down the people of the Eastern continent, they came here immediately. After a discussion, they decided to return to the great Oriental family and brought the 5 elements mountain to the Central Prefecture. Just in time, the sacred Kylin and the others were in danger. "Alas, you shouldn't have come here." The sacred Kylin sighed with a dim look. The plan of hundreds of years was in vain. The arrival of the black and white mortal fairies would only increase the casualties. The situation was hopeless. We have already died once. Why should we cherish our lives? Even if we die, we will drag the Central Prefecture's king down with us. The black and white mortal fairies said at the same time. The force of the 5 elements was getting stronger and stronger. The whole Eastern continent could feel the inexplicable pressure. The Central Prefecture's king, who was close by, could sense the existence of the force of the 5 elements. The black and white mortal immortals looked at each other and shouted. Then they raised the 5 elements mountain and threw it toward the Central Prefecture's king. This seemingly simple throw almost exhausted all the strength of the black and white mortal fairies. The 2 of them collapsed to the ground and almost passed out on the spot. There was not a bit of mortal fairies' strength left in their bodies. It could be seen that this throw was no small matter. We've studied the 5 elements mountain for many years, but this is as far as we can go. I hope it will be useful. Rumble, the 5 elements mountain flew out. In an instant, colorful lights flew out from the inside of the mountain, especially the bottom of the mountain, which burst out bright lights and enveloped the Central Prefecture's king. The Central Prefecture's king wanted to avoid it, but he found that the colorful light contained enormous power of the 5 elements, which slowed his movement. Unable to avoid it, he was pressed down by the 5 elements mountain. At the same time, there was also the extremely strong power of the 5 elements. The black and white mortal fairies and god Kylin's eyes lit up at the same time. Could this method work? After all, this was a mountain that had once suppressed a god to death. If it could unleash its power, it would definitely be extremely terrifying. However, the next moment, a scene that made all of them depressed suddenly happened. The Central Prefecture's king grabbed upwards with one hand, and the whole 5 elements mountain was lifted up by one hand. He sneered, "If you have reached the 2nd stage of the mortal fairy, I will be afraid of the power of this throw." Unfortunately, the power of 2 mortal fairies at the 1st stage is less than 1/10 of the power of a mortal fairy at the 2nd stage. Throwing the 5 elements mountain aside, the Central Prefecture's king sneered, "It's over, but who will die first?" His eyes wandered around the group of disabled mortal fairies, and he was very playful. The ghost prison's emperor was unwilling to be humiliated, so he shouted coldly, "If you want to kill us, just kill us. Do you think we will beg for mercy from you?" Because even if they begged for mercy, the Central Prefecture's king would not let them go. The Central Prefecture's king's eyes fell on him, and he said coldly, "Since you are the first one, let's start with you." Sizzle. A divine fire suddenly spurted out. However, the target of the fire was not the ghost prison's emperor, but Su Yu. "Little bastard, I will be relieved to kill you first." The Central Prefecture's king sneered. The ghost prison's emperor's face changed abruptly, and he teleported in front of Su Yu without thinking, blocking the divine fire. Poof! With a muffled sound, the ghost prison's emperor's body turned into ashes, leaving only a soul surrounded by ghost energy to escape from the divine fire. Even so, the ghost prison's emperor still stood in front of Su Yu, protecting him until the last moment. The Central Prefecture's king sneered, "It's really touching, but as a traitor, isn't it the best ending for you to die without a burial place?" Sizzle, a huge ball of divine fire, half a foot in size, transformed into a spear and pierced through the void. "No, be careful." Seeing this scene, Mo, Tianqian, Jian Wuxing, and even the black and white mortal fairies and others were extremely angry. The ghost prison's emperor had no chance of surviving. The ghost prison's emperor was not afraid, and he did not flinch. Instead, he looked death calmly and laughed loudly, "Central Prefecture's king, you will not have a good end." The crazy laughter made the Central Prefecture's king frown. He couldn't understand why the ghost prison's emperor was so persistent in helping Jiuzhou. This was not the ghost realm. Was it necessary for him to work so hard for Jiuzhou? Madman! The Central Prefecture's king snorted and was too lazy to watch anymore. Anyway, the end was doomed. Both he and Su Yu would be turned into ashes in the divine fire. But suddenly, the Central Prefecture's king's heart suddenly beat, and a strong sense of anxiety suddenly rose. This kind of anxiety, since breaking through to the fairy realm, has never appeared again. The last time was 1,000 years ago, when he was at the peak of the all-creation realm. He was exploring a desolate cavern world, and he was chased by a wild beast of the mortal fairy realm. This chase lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. During these 3 days, he was on the run all the time. If he stopped for a while, the man-eating monster behind him would catch up with him. That kind of constant anxiety, that kind of panic that may die at any time and anywhere, accompanied his life for hundreds of years. Many years later, he occasionally woke up from his meditation and remembered the scene of his narrow escape. Later, when he broke through to the mortal fairy realm, he turned back to kill the wild beast. An anxiety that lasted for hundreds of years finally dissipated. Until today, after 1,000 years, he never had that kind of strong anxiety again. But at this moment, the feeling that he almost thought he had forgotten came to his heart without warning. It seemed that the wild beast that he had killed had come back, standing behind him, looking down at him greedily and slowly opening its bloody mouth, ready to bite him at any time. Almost subconsciously, the Central Prefecture's king's body shook and his heart beat wildly. He turned his head, almost in fear. There was no wild beast, but a figure stood up and stared at him coldly. The cold, dark eyes made him feel like he was facing a wild beast. His heart twitched fiercely, and his hands and feet were cold. He said, Su Yu said lightly, "Just in time, 9 days are up." The tribulation of human broke out at this moment. Looking at the 5 feet of divine fire, Su Yu calmly stepped out. With this step, 9 dark scorching suns surrounded Su Yu's chest, like 9 suns protecting him. The divine fire couldn't break through the 9 suns. At the last moment, he finally refined the last trace of the bloodline of the cultivation deity, and his cultivation soared to the peak of the mortal fairy realm. Under such a realm, the great sun punishment fairy painting was like water flowing into a canal, easily refining the remaining 7 blazing suns. One was the tribulation of Thunder Feather, and the other was the tribulation of divine fire. No one could defeat the other. The Central Prefecture's king finally calmed down and took a breath to suppress the panic in his heart. Then he released a more powerful divine fire, which shrouded Suyu like a fire cloud. However, in the divine fire, Suyu's figure didn't change at all. He walked out of the fire cloud step by step and came to the Central Prefecture's king. Do you have any other moves to prepare? Die. The Central Prefecture's king suddenly punched Suyu's small body with his fist, which was full of the power of the demon god. The power of the demonic palm, which was like a small mountain, was unstoppable. The earth shook and a space crack was broken into pieces. Bang! The whole earth shook when the fist was punched. Emo Tianxian and the others opened their eyes wide and stared at the situation under the demonic fist in the fog. When the fog dissipated, they were a little relieved. Under the demonic fist, Suyu raised his right hand and pointed at the palm of the demonic fist with his index finger. Suyu's finger showed a strange golden color at this moment. It didn't look like a human finger, and golden scales could be seen vaguely. Suyu looked calm and said indifferently, "Break!" Boom! The golden finger seemed to be full of the power of creation. A golden beam of light, which frightened all the mortal fairies, penetrated the demonic palm, went all the way along the arm through the shoulder armor, and passed through the head of the Central Prefecture's king. Bang! When the golden beam of light rushed out, there was a bang sound. The fist and arm of the Central Prefecture's king were all blown up. On the right side of the head, there was a deep blood groove, which was so deep that the bone could be seen. Just one finger could do such a thing. Even Emo Tianxian didn't reach this level before. This is more than the power of the peak mortal fairy, right? The ghost prison's great emperor looked at the golden beam of light dissipating in the sky and shivered. Emo Tianxian said calmly, "No, in the golden beam of light, there is a breath of the dragon god." The period of 9 days was also the time when the 10 real dragon spirit veins were integrated into Suyu's body, and the body of the 9 dragons was achieved. The Central Prefecture's king was shocked that he was at a disadvantage in this fight. It's not over yet. The Central Prefecture's king was unwilling to give up, and his huge demonic foot stepped on the air. Now the Central Prefecture's king had an illusion that Suyu was still an ant that could be easily crushed to death, an ant that could be crushed to death with 1 foot. How could he admit that an ant was on an equal footing with him? Destroy! Suyu said a word indifferently. His whole right fist was covered with golden scales, and he punched the foot of the Central Prefecture's demonic foot very calmly. Chapter 11:18. With a bang, the right foot, leg, and right half of the body of the Central Prefecture's king exploded with a loud bang. Even his neck was blasted off by the golden pillar of light, leaving only his spine connected to his head, smashing half of the body of the Central Prefecture's king with a single punch. At this moment, the Central Prefecture's king finally recovered from the cruelty. His pupils shrank, and his back was covered with cold sweat. He had definitely reached the peak of the mortal fairy's power. Coupled with the golden power, even a peak mortal fairy would not be a match for him. Moreover, Suyu hadn't used the celestial destroying arrow yet. Run! That unsuppressible panic, the panic and uneasiness of 1,000 years, surged forth like a flood bursting through a dam. Roar! With a roar, the divine 9-dragon cauldron, the celestial destroying arrow, and the illusory deity position disappeared from the mind of the Central Prefecture's king. He turned around and tore the void, and the remaining half of his demon body immediately escaped into it. All he wanted now was to stay alive. Suyu watched the Central Prefecture's king escape indifferently. He tore the void with one hand and chased after the Central Prefecture's king with enormous mortal fairy strength. Emo Tianxian, the sacred Kailin, Jian Wuxing, and the ghost prison's great emperor were all shocked. They looked at each other, speechless. Suyu, who had broken through to the peak mortal fairy, was too fierce. They had expected that a peak mortal fairy would be able to kill the Central Prefecture's king with a celestial destroying arrow. Judging from the current situation, Su Yu could kill the Central Prefecture's king even without the celestial destroying arrow. Go. Let's catch up. The sacred Kylan's eyes lit up with excitement, and he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Little Su has given me so many surprises. I thought we were all done for. Everyone's eyes lit up. How could they miss the end of the Central Prefecture's king? With the cultivation of a peak mortal fairy, Su Yu could cross hundreds of millions of mountains and rivers with a single step. He had crossed the lower half of the central continent. This was the Heaven's Craftsman domain, one of the 5 domains under the jurisdiction of the Central Prefecture's king. Standing above the Heaven's Craftsmanship region, Su Yu's cold and disdainful eyes looked around. The boundless mortal fairy's strength surged in all directions, startling billions of creatures. With Su Yu's current cultivation, he found a mortal fairy's aura in the Heaven's Craftsmanship city at first glance. However, it was not the Central Prefecture's king. Whoosh! The next moment, Su Yu teleported above the Heavenly Craftsmanship city and said indifferently, "Come out!" His voice wasn't loud, but it was like the voice of the heavens, reaching everyone's ears. However, the aura of the mortal fairy could not be hidden. Su Yu furrowed his brows and teleported to the center of the city, where a towering mountain stood. At the peak of the mountain, there was a statue of a green bull that was being worshipped. Rumor had it that he was the founder of the Heaven's Craftsman region, who had been worshipped for generations. "Stop!" Someone stepped forward to stop him. It was the headmaster of the Heaven's Craftsman region, an expert at the peak of all creations. Su Yu glanced at the region master, who let out a muffled groan and was pushed away by an invisible force. The region master's face was filled with shock. Who are you?" "Su Yu." 2 surprised voices came from the crowd. Su Yu glanced sideways at them. He had some impression of both of them. In the mysterious Heavenly Divine Pavilion, he had a brief encounter with the Heaven's Craftsman faction. One of them was the eldest senior brother, whose name was still unknown, and the other was a woman named Shine. Ever since the 2 of them had returned from the mysterious Heavenly Divine Pavilion, they had made significant improvements, especially the eldest senior brother, who was about to break through to the all creations realm. "What, Su Yu?" The Heaven's Craftsman region master was startled. He looked Su Yu up and down and said, while shaking his head, "No." How high is Su Yu's cultivation? Moreover, he is being hunted by the Central Prefecture's king. The Heaven's Craftsman region master took a deep breath and bowed to Su Yu. "Senior, may I ask why you have come to the Heaven's Craftsman region?" Su Yu stared at the bronze statue and said, "Nothing. I am here to find the Central Prefecture's king and save the remnant soul of your dying old ancestor." Swish! Su Yu didn't do anything, but the bronze bull statue, which had been standing for countless years, cracked open all of a sudden. The Heaven's Craftsman region master was shocked by what he saw in the statue. In the statue, a broken demonic body was chewing the soul of a dying bronze bull in its mouth. Devouring souls to replenish primordial chi was a special method of the demons. "Ah, Grandmaster." The Heaven's Knife region master was shocked. However, he didn't dare to approach Su Yu because of the demonic power. Su Yu teleported to the front of the demonic body and pointed a finger between its eyebrows. Then he said calmly, "Do you want to hide your scent from me by using the bronze bull's scent? Central Prefecture's king, do you think you can escape?" The Central Prefecture's king changed his expression abruptly. He had to put down the bronze bull's remnant soul and block Su Yu's finger with his newly recovered arm. At the same time, he tore the void with his right hand and turned around to escape. Bang! The Central Prefecture's king's arm, which had recovered with great difficulty, was smashed by Su Yu's finger. Su Yu looked at the dying bronze bull's remnant soul calmly. Then he tore open the void and continued his pursuit. Old Ancestor. The Heaven's Knife Region Master hurried forward and protected the remnant soul of the Old Ancestor with an excellent treasure. The Bronze Bull's remnant soul stared in the direction where Suyu had left. His eyes were full of shock and confusion. Master, is that young man really Suyu? Shine bit her red lips and asked anxiously. The eldest senior brother was even more worried. The Heaven's Knife Region Master said in a low voice, No, Suyu is being hunted by the Central Prefecture's king. How could he appear here? Wait. He suddenly remembered that the peerless mortal fairy seemed to have mentioned the origin of the demonic body, the Central Prefecture's king. That demonic body is the Central Prefecture's king? How could it be? The Heaven's Knife Region Master couldn't believe the Central Prefecture's king was a demonic body. However, he was interrupted by the Bronze Bull's remnant soul before he could finish his words. The Central Prefecture's king is doomed. Ahem, ahem, ahem. Suyu is so strange in this world. I can't believe he hunted the Central Prefecture's king. The mountain peak fell into a dead silence. Undoubtedly, the young mortal fairy was Suyu. The Bronze Bull's remnant soul looked at the eldest senior brother and Shine and sighed. You too will be expelled from the faction, temporarily. You can come back when Suyu forgives you. Both of them trembled and left the mountain peak bitterly. The Old Ancestor didn't give their heads to Suyu. All they could do was to repair their relationship with Suyu. Another teleportation that crossed billions of mountains and rivers. When Suyu appeared again, he was in the Tianyo Prefecture. When he was hunted by the Central Prefecture's king, he expelled Suyu immediately and even wanted to capture Suyu and send him to the Central Prefecture's king. Suyu still remembered the Tianyo Prefecture's king. When Suyu appeared in the void, his perception as a peak mortal fairy swept over thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. The Central Prefecture's king had nowhere to hide. However, the Central Prefecture's king's aura was still in this city. Suyu couldn't find his exact whereabouts. Did he hide? Moreover, he needed someone to help him. Otherwise, the Central Prefecture's king's strong aura of the demon clan would be difficult to hide. King of the Tianyo Prefecture, come out. Suyu shouted indifferently. His voice was like thunder rolling over the city. Swish! A middle-aged man in red armor appeared in surprise. When he saw the familiar young man in front of him, he couldn't help but say, Suyu! Then a thought appeared in his mind. If he could catch this young man, Suyu interrupted him. Where is the Central Prefecture's king? What? The king of the Tianyo Prefecture almost thought he heard it wrong. Wasn't the Central Prefecture's king hunting him? Although the Central Prefecture's king said he was being hunted by a strong enemy, it didn't make sense that the young man who was hunted in the past would be trampled on. Could it be that he was a spy sent by that strong enemy? Thinking of this, his face became cold and a trace of coldness appeared in his eyes. Isn't the Central Prefecture's king hunting you? You should know it best. The king of the Tianyo Prefecture shook his head indifferently and stepped forward. With a wave of his hand, a stream of mortal fairy strength surrounded Suyu and said, By the way, you teleported to the forbidden area of the Tianyo city at will. I suspect that you have ulterior motives. I have the right to interrogate you. Suyu is a genius with no foundation. Who would embarrass the king of the Tianyo Prefecture? Suyu didn't move and said lightly, You really haven't seen the Central Prefecture's king? This place is so full of demonic energy. As a prefecture's king, how could you not notice? The king of the Tianyo Prefecture didn't wait for him to finish and suddenly shouted, How dare you? How dare you question me, a little subject? Sure enough, there is something wrong with you. I must interrogate you. As he raised his hand, the king of the Tianyo Prefecture rapped Suyu with the mortal fairy strength. However, what made him slightly surprised was that his mortal fairy's strength seemed to be wrapped around a boundless mountain, and he could not move it at all. Interrogate? Well, I really should interrogate you. How dare you cover up for the demons? Su Yu's face was cold. God Kailan's worries were not false. He had been dead for 10,000 years. The minds of the 9 prefectures' kings were unpredictable. If he believed the king of the Tianyu prefecture rashly, the possibility of being betrayed was really high. Wow. Su Yu released the aura of the peak mortal fairy. With a wave of his sleeve, a huge stream of mortal fairies' strength trapped the king of the Tianyu prefecture. The king of the Tianyu prefecture finally changed his face and said in disbelief, You, bang! Su Yu grabbed the king of the Tianyu prefecture in his palm and slammed him to the ground. With a muffled sound, the body of the king of the Tianyu prefecture was crushed directly. Even his soul suffered irreparable damage. Where is the central prefecture's king? Su Yu asked indifferently. The king of the Tianyu prefecture, who originally wanted to argue, was scared out of his wits. Without saying a word, Su Yu smashed his body directly. This is too vicious. He didn't even dare to resent Su Yu. He stammered, In the secret underground room of my mansion, where the aura can be isolated. Su Yu snorted coldly and punched the mansion of the king of the Tianyu prefecture. With a loud bang, the mansion of the king of the Tianyu prefecture, which was protected by dozens of defensive formations, was smashed into ruins and revealed a secret underground room that was thousands of feet deep. Sure enough, in the secret room, a 1,000 feet tall demon was staring at Su Yu angrily. Do you really want to kill me? Su Yu said indifferently, You are the least qualified to say this. After saying that, he punched the central prefecture's king, who was escaping into the void with unparalleled golden power, smashed the body of the central prefecture's king, who had just recovered a little. Su Yu paused and looked at the soul of the king of the Tianyu prefecture, who was about to escape into the void. Without looking at him, the reincarnation ripples appeared in Su Yu's eyes and directly sealed his soul into the soul space. Chapter 1119. Half an hour later, in the Yuantian prefecture, looking around the city, Su Yu said with a cold smile, Good! Another prefecture's king who dares to hide demons. In the next moment, a terrified soul rushed out from a certain mansion and said in fear, Su, you destroyed my physical body. You and I are irreconcilable. You can talk big after you escape. Su Yu opened his reincarnation eyes and sealed the soul of the prefecture's king. Then, Su Yu smashed a stone pillar in the Tianyuan prefecture. The central prefecture's king, who was hiding in it, roared angrily and ran away immediately. Su Yu just left a little wound on his body to make sure that he couldn't recover completely. Half an hour later, in the Huiming prefecture, Su Yu stopped for a while and looked at the sky. At this time, the Huiming prefecture's king teleported here and looked at Su Yu in surprise. Su Yu replied with a faint smile, Where is the central prefecture's king? Hearing this, the Huiming prefecture's king was greatly stressed. Isn't this Su Yu who is being chased by the central prefecture's king? Why is he chasing the central prefecture's king? The most shocking thing is his strength. Without hesitation, the Huiming prefecture's king pointed to the north and said, He came here hoping to be protected by me. However, I refused him and he fled to the North Continent. Okay. Su Yu nodded and left by tearing the void apart. Half an hour later, in the Pasua prefecture, the corners of Su Yu's mouth curled up into a cold smile again. Very good, another one. After a while, an old woman's soul screamed and was sealed. In the lake of the Pasua prefecture, the central prefecture's king was found. At this moment, the central prefecture's king finally found Su Yu's purpose. He had the celestial destroying arrow with him, but he didn't use it to kill the central prefecture's king. Instead, he left a little wound on the central prefecture's king and kept chasing him. Moreover, he didn't warn the other prefecture's kings that the central prefecture's king was not allowed to stay here. Su Yu's purpose was to kill all the prefecture's kings who had a good relationship with the central prefecture's king and protected him even though they knew he was a demon. You are too cruel. You're even more ruthless than me. The Central Prefecture's king let out the hatred from the bottom of his heart. In the past, the Central Prefecture's king had regarded Su-Kei as an ant. But once he grasped the power, he realized that Su-Kei's ruthlessness was even worse than his. Su, you actually wanted to clean up the entire Jojo continent and eliminate the roots of the relationship network of the Central Prefecture's king. The 3 prefectures' kings, whom he had secretly befriended and intended to help him sell the Jojo continent, had all been killed by Su Yu. Thank you for letting me win. Do you still want to continue running? Su Yu asked calmly. The Central Prefecture's king's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. If he didn't escape, he would die. Although escaping would implicate others, if he died a little later, he would have more hope of surviving. If I don't die, I will make you pay 1,000 times the price. The Central Prefecture's king roared as he tore the void apart and continued to escape. The 3 prefectures' kings were already dead, and the rest were just some greedy region lords. Su Yu chased them all the way, killing without mercy, not even sparing their souls. Su Yu's bloody footprints could be found in every prefecture of the Jojo continent. For a time, the whole Jojo continent was boiling. It was rumored that Su Yu was hunting down the Central Prefecture's king. Anyone who was related to the Central Prefecture's king would be killed. With panic, the rumor spread rapidly to every corner of the Jojo continent within a whole day. Except for those who were related to the Central Prefecture's king, who were frightened and worried that the Central Prefecture's king would lead Su Yu here. The rest of the forces and martial artists knew the true identity of the Central Prefecture's king and his sinister intentions. There were also 3 prefectures' kings who helped the wicked and tried to sell the Jojo continent. The sacred Kailan has been dead for 10,000 years, and people's hearts are rotten. There are 3 prefectures' kings who turned to the Central Prefecture's king and tried to sell the Jojo continent. Good job. These vermin should all be killed. Wait, I think we should collect evidence and report the vermin that Lord Su Yu didn't find. Of course, what they were more interested in was that Su Yu was hunting down the Central Prefecture's king all over the world. He used to chase the Blood Emperor, and now he is chasing the Central Prefecture's king. Alas, we are no match for him. I just don't know how he compares with the missing destined emperor. It shouldn't be too far apart, right? If Zhan Wushuang is the destined emperor, I think Su Yu is the heaven-defying emperor. One is the son of heaven, and the other is the son of heaven. Looking back at Su Yu's development, everyone was silent. It was really difficult for him to advance from the humble bottom to where he was today. The town was in an uproar, and Su Yu's life story quickly spread, becoming a legend. Especially when he hunted down the Central Prefecture's king. People gave him the title of Silver-Haired Fairy. After 2 days, Su Yu almost killed most of the Jojo continent. Today, even the Central Prefecture's king didn't know where to hide. Although there were a few survivors, they all hid early and did not dare to have any contact with him. How could he hide? As for the other prefecture's kings, if he went there, he would be immediately entangled and handed over to Su Yu. Although the world was big, there was no place for him to hide. Unable to escape, the Central Prefecture's king said in a sincere tone, Su Yu, I can leave Juzhou and swear that I will never set foot in Juzhou again in my life. I am willing to compensate you for all your losses. How about we reconcile now? Su Yu flicked the blood off his body and said lightly, From the first time you attacked me, there was no possibility of reconciliation. The existence of the divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron should never be known by a third person. This was Su Yu's bottom line. The Central Prefecture's king said, As for the divine Nine-Dragon Cauldron, I can also swear that I will never disclose it to another person. Do you trust a living person or a dead person? Su Yu did not answer but asked. The Central Prefecture's king was stunned. Of course, he trusted a dead person. Think about it carefully. If I die, you will die. The Central Prefecture's king said sternly. Su Yu said calmly, I have thought about it very clearly. You must die." After saying that, Su Yu's right arm flashed with golden light, and he punched the Central Prefecture's king. The survivors were almost killed, and it was time to end it. However, the Central Prefecture's king refused to be killed. He tore the void apart and chose to escape. Su Yu followed him closely. When he landed on the ground, he found he was in a strange continent with an obscure aura. Everywhere was full of mist. When Su Yu looked through the mist, he found he couldn't see millions of miles away even with the strength of a peak mortal fairy. In the depths of the mist, Su Yu vaguely sensed the aura that even a peak mortal fairy would be afraid of. Is this the far west land? Su Yu was terrified. He was quite familiar with the forbidden area of the Jojo continent. Whether it was ancient records or modern documents, they all had records of the far west. An evaluation of the far west in all of these records had remained the same throughout the ages. The forbidden area of the living creatures, the portrait of Xia Jingyu, the broken horn of God Kailin, and the 5 elements flash were all excavated from the far west land. Nobody knew the whole picture of the far west land. They only knew that no one who went deep into the far west land could come back alive. Even the strong mortal fairies couldn't come back alive. As an ancient family, the black and white mortal fairies only dared to move in the periphery of the far west land for many years. Suddenly, Su Yu heard a scream. It was the Central Prefecture's king. Su Yu glanced over and saw the body of the Central Prefecture's king, hidden in the mist, suddenly jumped up as if he was bitten by something. Su Yu fixed his eyes on the Central Prefecture's king and saw a python whose cultivation was comparable to a peak mortal fairy was chasing him. The python turned its head and looked at Su Yu with cold and greedy eyes. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat when he was stared at by it. This python gave Su Yu an extremely dangerous feeling, which was even more dangerous than the Central Prefecture's king. If that was the case, it would have been fine. However, Su Yu quickly discovered that there was not just one python. They swept through the mist in groups and devoured all the creatures along the way. Among them, 9 pythons found Su Yu and swam towards him as fast as lightning. Coincidentally, the Central Prefecture's king couldn't hide anymore, so he tore the space to escape. Su Yu's eyes lit up as he followed the Central Prefecture's king. Half an hour later, Su Yu appeared in the Central Prefecture. The Central Prefecture's king couldn't escape anymore, so he finally escaped back to the Central Prefecture. Standing in the ruins of the Central Prefecture city, the Central Prefecture's king stared at Su Yu, who was chasing him, and shouted coldly, "Su Yu, I ask you for the last time, are you willing to make peace with me?" "No," Su Yu said as he took out a golden arrow. Then he put the celestial destroying arrow on the bowstring with the mortal fairy strength in his left hand. Give him a fatal blow and end the century-old resentment of the continent. "You, what do you want to make peace with me?" The Central Prefecture's king was extremely angry. He only mentioned reconciliation all the time, but never begged for mercy. Obviously, he was not reconciled. If there was a chance, the Central Prefecture's king would make a comeback. At that time, without the celestial destroying arrow and the bloodline of the cultivation deity, who could stop him? Seeing Su Yu's eyes were getting sharper and sharper, the Central Prefecture's king was in a panic of death. Then he said in a low voice, "If I die, you won't have a good time." "You can't see whether I have a good time or not." Su Yu was about to shoot an arrow. However, at this moment, a strand of extremely powerful mortal fairies' strength rolled over like a torrent. "All of you, stop!" The magnificent mortal fairies' strength swept over, and its main target was not the Central Prefecture's king, but Su Yu. The Central Prefecture's king rolled his eyes and was about to take this opportunity to escape. However, as soon as he moved, Su Yu's celestial destroying arrow followed him. It seemed the Central Prefecture's king would shoot the celestial destroying arrow if he dared to move. Swish! With a loud noise, a void crack appeared behind Su Yu. Then, an old man in white walked out of it. It was the old region master of the Heavenly Knife region. However, under the realm of the mortal fairy, It could be clearly seen that there was another soul in his body, a soul of the stage 2 mortal fairy. Feeling the boundless mortal fairy strength, Suyu's feet shone with golden light. Then he was instilled with the strength of the dragon. However, he didn't move a bit in the raging torrent. Are you deaf? Do you want me to say it again? Put down the arrow. Now everyone is under my control. The old man in white, or the soul of the mortal fairy, said coldly. Suyu said indifferently, Who are you? Chapter 1120. Humph. I am the law enforcement officer of the Great Eastern Alliance, and I am ordered to kill the demon. I will take your demon back for interrogation, and you are not allowed to shoot him. The old man's body fell down, and a soul flew out of it. It was a dark-skinned young man with gloomy eyes. He was crossing his arms in front of his chest and saying proudly, with an arrogant look. From his eyes, Suyu felt a deep disdain. It was a disdain that came from his bones. It was just like how a rich man from the city would feel when he came to the countryside. It was natural for him to feel condescending and disdain. Hearing this, the Central Prefecture's king was overjoyed and immediately kowtowed. I will obey your orders, and I am willing to follow you back for investigation. The arrogant young man showed a trace of coldness and stared at Suyu. Do you want me to repeat it again? Put down your weapon. Suyu slowly put down the bow and arrow in his hand and said, What is the punishment for his crime of preparing to sell the cavern world? Shut up. How to enforce the law is confidential, and you can't ask. The arrogant young man raised his hand and pointed at the Central Prefecture's king. Come here. The Central Prefecture's king was overjoyed. The so-called Alliance law enforcement officer was a special existence that maintained the order of a large area of the cavern world, and the main task was to kill the demon. However, the young man in front of him did not kill him on the spot, but chose to take him back for investigation. The Central Prefecture's king looked into the young man's eyes, and the other party quietly nodded his chin, signaling him to rest assured. In this way, the Central Prefecture's king was relieved. This law enforcement officer was probably bought by the world of the gods, and now he came to rescue him. As long as he let him go on the way back to the Alliance, the Central Prefecture's king's escape would be foolproof. As for the investigation, humph, a cavern world without the protection of the gods, who would be willing to investigate the law enforcement officer for such a place. It should be known that those who could join the ranks of law enforcement were all elites of the Great Eastern Alliance, and these elites were mostly from the families of the gods, although they were not necessarily descendants of the gods, who dared to offend the elites cultivated by such a huge family. Thinking of this, the Central Prefecture's king sneered and walked past Suyu. At the moment when he passed by, he laughed. Suyu, Suyu, the waters of Jojo are deep. You, an ant, can't make a big wave. Ha ha ha. Like a winner, the Central Prefecture's king walked toward the law enforcer. However, he had only taken a few steps when he felt a chill on his back. Immediately after, his body felt as if it was being incinerated, and then his soul was being torn apart. He looked down at his chest, where a golden arrow had pierced through his chest. The sharp arrow contained an astonishing power that was wreaking havoc within his body, rapidly destroying his physical body and even his soul. His pupils gradually dilated, and he turned his head to look. Suyu was slowly putting away the bow in his hand. The celestial destroying arrow had disappeared. You dare to kill me. The Central Prefecture's king never expected that Suyu would dare to kill him in front of the law enforcers. As his vision gradually blurred, the Central Prefecture's king was furious. He was about to escape, but Suyu, her resentment and hatred turned into a malicious curse. Suyu, I curse you to die a horrible death. The land of Divine will never forgive you. My father and mother will never forgive you. Heavenly demon curse. At the last moment, the Central Prefecture's king opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood, which was full of the power of the demon god. It condensed into a mark of a demon's head and teleported to Suyu's chest. Suyu couldn't avoid it and was branded on his chest by the mark. Suyu had no time to check it. With a flash of cold light, his fists flashed with golden light, and the Central Prefecture's king was completely killed. Even his soul was destroyed together. In a dark hall, 1,000 feet tall demonic shadow in an ancient red robe suddenly showed a shocked expression, followed by anger, and then a ferocious expression. Who killed my son? Who? In the roar, the divine power ran through the years and the stars, traversing the gloomy cavern world. In a bright and peaceful world, a beautiful woman suddenly covered her chest, and her eyes were full of sadness and anger. My son is dead? Obviously, the law enforcers were sent to rescue him. Why is he still dead? Who did it? Suyu didn't stop after killing the Central Prefecture's king. He grabbed with one hand and blasted open the space where the Central Prefecture's king's treasures were stored. All the treasures in it were burned by Suyu, leaving no trace of their aura. He erased everything that the Central Prefecture's king had left in the world to prevent him from being resurrected. If Suyu knew that in this world, apart from Suyu, even the gods did not have the ability to resurrect another creature, he would not be so careful. The law enforcers, who were close at hand, did not expect that someone dared to kill the Central Prefecture's king in front of him. However, when he reacted, Suyu had already destroyed his body and soul, leaving not even a trace of his soul. You are courting death. The law enforcer roared, almost furious, and attacked with his soul body. Kneel down! He was really shocked and angry. This task was personally ordered by the young master of the clan, but it was ruined. What kind of punishment would he receive when he returned? If he did not capture Suyu and take him back, he shuddered at the thought of the young master's character. Get lost! Suyu answered him with a slap. Puff! Even if the law enforcers were in their heyday, they were no match for the peak mortal fairy, let alone a mere soul. They relied on their identity as law enforcers, and in the other cavern worlds, they were naturally afraid of everyone. However, in the Jojo cavern world, the gods had fallen for nearly 10,000 years, and no one had taught the creatures of Jojo about the outside world. What the law enforcers were, what the Great Eastern Alliance was completely blank. Under such circumstances, a mere stage 2 mortal fairy was acting like a tyrant in front of a peak mortal fairy. It would be strange if he was not injured. You dare to hurt me? The law enforcer was furious. Suyu stared at him coldly. Where you are from, what your identity is, I don't care, but this demon tried to sell Jojo, and killing him is the internal affairs of Jojo. You did not attack the demon clan, but took me as your enemy. When I killed him, you then killed me. Humph! Now I want to know whether you are a law enforcer or sent by the demon clan. Suyu walked towards the law enforcer. The law enforcer was ashamed and angry. As a law enforcer, except for the gods, who was not afraid of him. As a law enforcer, I have supreme privileges. You are just an ant in the mortal world. What qualifications do you have to question me? The law enforcer stood up and said coldly, I'd better teach you what a law enforcer is first, ignorant savage. Slap. As soon as the voice fell, Suyu's figure, like the wind, teleported over, raised his hand, and slapped the face of the law enforcer, slapping him to the ground. Well, this is the law enforcer, ignorant and fearless. Suyu stepped on his chest, making him unable to move, and interrogated. Tell me, what is your relationship with the Central Prefecture's king? I don't believe that you came so coincidentally and appeared at such a suitable time. You didn't appear earlier or later, but when he was about to be killed, you took him back. The law enforcer almost went berserk. He wanted to popularize the concept of law enforcers, but what he got was a rough slap in the face. Because of anger, his eyes were bloodshot, and he gritted his teeth, saying one word at a time with hatred. I will never, Dong! This time a foot stepped on his face, and half of his face was stepped into the ground. You haven't figured out the situation. Do you think I won't kill you? Suyu said lightly. This sentence finally made the law enforcer tremble. He vaguely remembered that many years ago, when a law enforcer was enforcing the law in a deserted cavern world, he was killed by the ignorant savage inside. Thinking of this, the law enforcer broke out in a cold sweat. Accustomed to showing off in front of people, the law enforcer woke up from a dream, and his heart was filled with uneasiness. But for him to surrender to a savage was simply wishful thinking. "Humph, you wait, I will never let you go." The law enforcer shouted coldly and crushed a fiery red jade pendant at his waist. The jade pendant suddenly shattered, and a majestic power of space transmission gushed out, wrapping the body of the law enforcer. What he wanted to do was to send the news back to the family as soon as possible and let the young master know. As for how to deal with the savage in front of him, with the temperament of the young master, the law enforcer couldn't help but feel a touch of pleasure. If he fell into the hands of the young master, he would hate himself for being born in this world. However, Suyu sneered, "It seems that you care about something, but do you think you can escape?" A pair of eyes filled with reincarnation ripples looked into the eyes of the law enforcer. Suddenly, before the space transmission, the law enforcer was drawn into the soul space. At this moment, God Kylan, Mo Tianxian, and the others who were chasing and watching also arrived at the final battlefield. There was no trace of the Central Prefecture's king. "Is he dead?" God Kylan tried to ask. Suyu nodded. "Yes, he is dead." Hearing this, although everyone already knew the result, they still couldn't help but feel excited. At the same time, a deep sense of exhaustion hit them. After 100 years of dormancy, they finally completed the great cause and killed the Central Prefecture's king. Day and night, after so much effort, they finally succeeded. Moreover, Suyu was extremely ruthless. He uprooted the Central Prefecture's king's accomplices one by one, cleaned up the filth, and returned peace and tranquility to Jiuzhou. Only Suyu knew that Jiuzhou would not be peaceful. The Central Prefecture's king was not the only one who was watching Jiuzhou. "Seniors, you should all take a rest." Suyu looked at the crowd. Those who were seriously injured and had lost their bodies didn't have time to rest. God Kylan smacked his lips. "Yes, all of you go. You have worked hard in the past 100 years. The ghost prison's great emperor paused, and finally he still wanted to say something. Then he went aside to repair his body on the spot. Jian Wuxing supported Mo Tianxian, who was seriously injured, to repair her body and help Mo Tianxian heal her wounds. "Brother Suyu, I will wait for you." Qin Xiener stepped aside obediently. Her two bright big eyes were looking at Suyu, and her heart was full of sweetness and pride. When the others left, Suyu said, "Do you have something to say to me?" God Kylan changed his cynical attitude and nodded. "Yes, I have an important thing to discuss with you." "Say it," Suyu said as he looked at his body. The realm of the peak mortal fairy was showing signs of decline. Chapter 11:21. However, after experiencing the law enforcers, Suyu wasn't surprised. "Since you know you can't keep it, why did you destroy the Central Prefecture's king for hundreds of years?" Suyu asked. God Kylan must have a plan. God Kylan sighed. "The value of a cavern world depends on its prosperity. For a deity, a prosperous cavern world is equivalent to an abundance of celestial energy sphere. Refining the whole cavern world can get the celestial energy sphere of the whole cavern world." Suyu already knew that the so-called cavern world, including the creatures, plants, and even the mountains and rivers, were created by the deities who created the world with the celestial energy sphere. If the whole cavern world was refined, theoretically, one could get the celestial energy sphere of the creation deity. The more prosperous the cavern world was, the more abundant the celestial energy sphere was, so it was more valuable. Since my death 10,000 years ago, I have been secretly transferring the celestial energy sphere of Jiuzhou to the other 99 small cavern worlds that I created when I was alive, God Kylan said. Suyu's heart skipped a beat, and he took out the martial tower from his arms. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "It turns out that I've been running around the continent with 100 cavern worlds. He remembered that the 100th story of the Marshall Tower was a small cavern world equivalent to the Jinlong continent. So, apart from the first story, the rest of the 98 stories should be the same. Yes, they were transferred to the world of the Marshall Tower. God Kylin opened his mouth. He felt that nothing could be hidden from Suyu. He wanted to say something, but he was used to Suyu's ability to guess. He continued, but the way they were transferred was very gentle and slow. Suyu thought about it and suddenly remembered that God Kylin had said that killing the geniuses in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion was for their own good. The glittering jewel mortal fairy also confirmed this. In the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion, the challengers who were killed were transferred to the world of the Marshall Tower, right? Suyu said with a wry smile. God Kylin was a little angry. You have guessed everything. Can't I regain some sense of superiority? After pausing for a moment, the Qilin rolled his eyes and said, That's right. All the challengers who died in the mysterious heavenly divine pavilion were transferred to the Marshall Tower. The humans you saw on the 100th level were the descendants of the earliest batch of challengers from Juzhou. They have already reproduced in that world and are living in peace. It's just that this method is too slow. Only 9,000 of the continent's most outstanding trial takers can be transferred every 100 years. However, if they were too hasty and moved all the living creatures and all the mountains and rivers, it would definitely lead to the action of the covetous people outside, and the Central Prefecture's king was one of them. He noticed that the vitality of the 9 regions was constantly weakening, so he speculated that I was the one behind it. Therefore, he hurriedly came to the 9 regions in an attempt to sell it as soon as possible. Speaking of this, the sacred Kylin sighed deeply. I can feel that as the time of my death grows longer and longer, the old friends of the past will fade away, and more people begin to covet Juzhou. In the future, there will be more and more Central Prefecture's kings coming. One day, we won't be able to defend it. Therefore, I want to catch all the covetous people off guard and empty the entire Juzhou continent. So the premise is to eliminate the Central Prefecture's king. So it is convenient to take action? Suyu continued his words and revealed the meaning of the sacred Kylin's 100 years of dormancy. God Kylin said, That's right. If he is still here, sudden action will definitely lead to his retaliation, and the news will definitely be leaked. At that time, in a hurry, the covetous people will swarm in, and you and I will not be able to stop them. Now, the Central Prefecture's king has been killed. While the news of his death has not spread to the cavern world, immediately move the entire Juzhou continent. Then you escape with the martial arts tower and let those covetous people get an empty shell, the sacred Kylin said. Suyu was shocked. Moving the entire continent? Can the world of the martial arts tower accommodate it? No problem. The 100th layer is just the smallest world, and the lower it is, the bigger it is. Moreover, I intend to open up all the 99 layers of the world to form a bigger world than the cavern world of Juzhou, which is enough to accommodate the creatures of Juzhou, the sacred Kylin said. Of course. Suyu agreed with this suggestion. He and the Jinlong creatures had already taken root in Juzhou. How could he tolerate them being refined into a celestial energy sphere and absorbed by a deity? However, there are 2 problems. The sacred Kylin frowned. Chapter 11:22. Brother Suyu, you don't need to worry. Before she left, Sister Jingyu said that she had calculated her own path, and that we might meet again in an unexpected place. Moreover, the life jade plate she left behind is still intact, Qin Xian'er said. Suyu was surprised by this. Where did Jingyu go? Why did she leave? Qin Xian'er paused for a moment, then said hesitantly, Sister Jingyu said that your relationship tribulation would fall on her, and that if she didn't leave, you would surely die. So, she left alone to find a way to resolve your relationship tribulation. Her relationship tribulation would fall on her? Suyu was quite surprised. He had assumed that it would be Xian'er, but who would have thought that it would be Jingyu? Suyu was quite worried. Fortunately, her life jade plate was still intact, which meant that her guess half a year ago was correct. Sienna, Su Yu looked at Sienna, who was standing in front of him. He didn't have any more doubts in his heart, so he said what he wanted to say. However, Sienna's slender fingers touched Su Yu's lips, while her face became flushed. Don't say it. I wasn't asleep at that time, so I heard everything you said. Ah. Su Yu was startled by her words. Sienna, you were very happy. Sienna mustered her courage, raised her face, and looked deeply into Su Yu's eyes. I've always felt sorry for you and Sister Jingyu. I knew that you loved each other, but I pretended not to know it. I selfishly took Sister Jingyu's place and became your wife. I'm really selfish. She then added, I'm already satisfied that Sister Jingyu has forgiven me, and I don't dare to ask for more. But, Brother Su Yu, what you said to me while I was asleep made me happy but also scared. Do you really think that a selfish girl like me is worthy of your love? Su Yu was startled, and as he looked at the tearful Sienna, he embraced her and said softly, Silly girl, have I ever lied to you? Sienna wiped her tears, then lowered her head and said, I'm not as pretty as Sister Jingyu, nor am I as gentle as her. I'm not as helpful as her. Brother Su Yu, do you really love me, or are you just trying to comfort me? It turned out that she had always had an inferiority complex in her heart. Ever since they first met, Xia Jingyu was like a precious jade that emitted an otherworldly aura in the mortal world. She was like a crane in a flock of chickens, and no woman could compare to her. It was the same now. But there's something about you that's on par with her. Su Yu wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. Sienna raised her head. What is it? It's a kind gesture. Su Yu tapped her chest and smiled gently. Sienna's tears turned into a smile, and she revealed a satisfied smile. She then buried herself in Su Yu's embrace and blushed as she said, Brother Su Yu, you touched me there. Only then did Su Yu realize that he was touching a well-developed softness. After resting for half a day, Su Yu's soul entered the 9-jade spiritual pearl. Xinga was lying beside the field, shaking a colorful butterfly in boredom. Su Yu was slightly surprised. When had he ever attracted butterflies? Ah, Master is here. Xinga jumped up, her face full of joy. The colorful butterfly landed on Xinga's shoulder intimately, as if it liked her very much. As for Su Yu, he was now more vigilant towards him. What is this? Su Yu asked as he looked at the butterfly. Xingup said happily, Congratulations, Master. The 5-colored chaos butterfly has broken out of its cocoon and transformed into a butterfly. Ah! Su Yu was taken aback and could not help but look over. This was an extinct ancient spiritual worm that was difficult to find even in the Xing River, the 5-colored chaos butterfly. It was first discovered in the seed of the heavenly orchid silver bamboo, and later began to spit out a strand of silk. That silk was extremely helpful to Su Yu. After not seeing it for so long, it had actually transformed from a caterpillar into a butterfly. During the transformation, it was always Xinga who accompanied it, so of course it was closer to Xinga. Master, it's very powerful. It says it can eat anything, Xinga chirped. When Su Yu heard that, he immediately looked at the nursery, and his face darkened. It really could eat anything. Many of the geniuses and earthly guardians transplanted in the nursery were thousands of years old, and all of them were eaten up. Even the incredible feather, spiritual pomegranate tree, which was at least 10,000 years old, was eaten up by the 5-colored chaos butterfly. The entire nursery was ruined to the point that it was too horrible to look at. The only thing to be thankful for was that the heavenly orchid silver bamboo was still there. After such a long period of cultivation, it was already 700 or 800 years old. Xinga stuck out her tongue. The last time you called me out, it was like this when I came back. It wanted to eat the heavenly orchid silver bamboo, but I stopped it. I could only feed it something else, but in the valley it seemed that this was all that was edible. The blue veins on Su Yu's forehead throbbed. He stared at the 5-colored chaos butterfly and said with dissatisfaction, "Where is your dignity as a mutant chaos butterfly? How did you mutate into a foodie?" It was no wonder that Suyu was angry. Although most of the transplanted things in the nursery were useless, some of them were precious spiritual things transplanted from the glittering jewel wonderland. Suyu was going to cultivate them to be more than 1,000 years old, but he didn't expect that they would all be eaten up. Unexpectedly, the lazy fatworm had now become a butterfly, and its spiritual wisdom had increased greatly. It understood Suyu's words and flapped its wings angrily at Suyu. Suyu smiled at his protest. However, his expression changed abruptly in the next moment. His physical body, which was in the state of the peak mortal fairy, was torn apart and was about to be destroyed. This was no small matter. Shinga also noticed the abnormality and hurriedly stopped it. "Stop, what are you doing? How can you attack the master?" The chaos multicolored butterfly unwillingly folded its beautiful wings and stared at Suyu arrogantly. Suyu was shocked and used the Heart of Eternity to restore his physical body. When he stared at the chaos butterfly again, Suyu's heart was filled with indescribable shock. The flapping of its wings could destroy the physical body of the peak mortal fairy? If it flapped with all its strength, wouldn't it destroy the soul? Shingo was shocked and apologized nervously. "Master, it's my fault. Please punish me." Suyu was full of smiles and waved his hand. "Ha ha ha, what's wrong? Take good care of the chaos butterfly, and it will be a great achievement." After thinking about it, Suyu activated the mortal fairy's strength and sealed it into the top of Shinga's head. This mortal fairy's strength should be enough for you to break through the all creation's realm. Hearing this, Shinga was overjoyed. The full mortal fairy's strength of the peak mortal fairy was more than enough to break through the all creation's realm. She could even fight for the all creation's peak. As for the chaos butterfly, since it's close to you, take good care of it, Suyu said. Shinga rolled her eyes and said, "Master, the chaos butterfly said that it can only release energy once after swallowing it. That blow just now was the result of swallowing all the spiritual treasures of the world." "Is that so?" Suyu was not too surprised. Such incredible power was not groundless. The power of swallowing the treasures of the world and transforming it into offensive power made sense. "Well, I will let you enter the glittering jewel wonderland. You can pick any spiritual treasures of the world and transplant them into the nursery. From now on, the task of feeding the chaos butterfly will be handed over to you." Hearing this, Shinga was overjoyed. Next, Suyu changed the layout of the 9 jade spiritual pearl with his mind. The supreme growing soil and the cottage with the remnant soul of the 9-tailed white fox were all isolated into another small enclosed space. Only the remaining space could accommodate the rest of the people. There were still 6 days, enough time to settle them down. His soul returned to his body. Suyu looked at the ghost prison's great emperor, who was frowning not far away. He walked over and said, "I have a question. Can you answer it?" The ghost prison's great emperor was shocked. He had already known about God Kylan's arrangement. The one who got the ticket was Suyu, and whether he could leave or not depended on Suyu. "Brother Su, please speak." The ghost prison's great emperor was completely on equal footing. Suyu said, "Can you tell me why you insist on helping the central prefecture?" As a ghost, the ghost prison's great emperor's previous performance was even more desperate than the people of Juzhou. The ghost prison's great emperor laughed bitterly. "Because I have no way out. The deity of the world of ghosts and souls is my father. He has 3 sons and I rank last. The 3 of us are being tempered by our father. Whoever succeeds will receive his help and become the new generation of ghost deities. Unfortunately, I am the most stupid and can't compare with my eldest brother and second brother. Seeing that they are gradually gaining my father's favor, I have to choose the most difficult task to support Jojo. My father also agreed because the ghost god and god Kylan are old friends. However, the situation of Jojo is much more complicated than I thought. In Jojo, I did not play much role. I am afraid that I will not be appreciated by my father when I go back this time. This is somewhat similar to the mortals fighting for the throne, isn't it? Why do you insist on letting your father assist you instead of working hard to become a god yourself? In Su Yu's view, the ghost prison's great emperor has the blood of the gods. Compared to ordinary mortals, it can be said that the pavilion closest to the water enjoys the moonlight first. Why does he insist on doing this? The ghost prison's great emperor was stunned and thought to himself, is it easy to become a god? Even with the full help of the ghost god, it is not necessarily possible to break through the position of the gods, let alone the most difficult to become a god alone. However, in the face of Su Yu in front of him, he could not say it. Su Yu started from an ordinary person and walked step by step to where he is today. It may not be easy to become a god. After a long time of contemplation, the ghost prison's great emperor's thoughts were clear. If he goes back now, he will not be able to get the favor of the ghost god. It is better to go out alone. Su Yu can make his current status. Why can't he? Thank you for your advice, Brother Su. If Brother Su is willing to take me all the way, I will be grateful. Su Yu smiled. Ghost brother, you don't have to be so polite. You have dedicated 100 years to Jujo. It is natural to take you away from Jujo. He knows nothing about the outside world. If there is a son of the ghost god accompanying him all the way, there are many benefits. With this in mind, Su Yu dealt with the ghost race and came to the 2 dust fairies. 2 seniors. Su Yu wanted to salute, but was stopped by the 2 dust fairies. Chapter 11:23. Su Yu did not put on any pretense, and simply asked, May I ask how many members of the great Oriental family are left? The black dust immortal's face showed a sad expression. There are only a few thousand people left. Although tens of thousands of people had used the transmission array to escape, over half of them had perished because the array formation had drawn out too much of their power of demon gods. In the end, only a few thousand remained. Don't worry, 2 elders. Please gather the remaining members of the clan and prepare to leave the 9 provinces cavern with me in a few days. I believe that if the distance is too far, the effect of the curse will weaken accordingly, quietly multiply, and we should be able to restore the Dongfang family to its peak. The 2 elders were pleasantly surprised. Su Yu was willing to bring them along. This great kindness, how can my Dongfang family ever repay it? White Dust Fairy looked at the shy and silent Dongfang Yu behind her, but secretly sighed. If she had married Su Yu before, it would have been possible. Now, how could Yu ever be worthy of him? The other party had a wife by his side, so it was even more impossible. Suddenly, the white dust immortal glanced at the 5 elements mountain behind them, and the black dust immortal also noticed it. The 2 of them looked at each other and nodded slightly. They had studied this mountain for many years, yet they had never ventured deep into its belly. Moreover, the power of 5 elements was not very useful to them. On the other hand, Su Yu's training in the belly of the mountain seemed to be beneficial to him. The 2 of them discussed and decided that it was the most suitable gift. Su Yu, the great Oriental family, is not fated to have the 5 elements mountain. It is beneficial to your training. On behalf of the great Oriental family, this mountain is a gift to you. I hope you won't reject it. Of course, Su Yu would not decline. The 5 elements mountain was useless to them, but it was a treasure to Su Yu. After pretending to be modest, Su Yu obtained the 5 elements mountain happily. Although the mountain couldn't be shrunk, it could be stored in the 9 jade spiritual pearl, which would save him a lot of trouble. Seeing Su Yu put away the mountain, the black and white dust fairies were taken aback. This mountain couldn't be contained in any space, not even the space created by the dust fairies. This kid even has a portable cavern world. What other treasures can catch his eye? I guess he accepted our 5 elements mountain reluctantly, didn't he? Thinking of Su Yu's several refusals, they couldn't help but smile bitterly. It seemed that Su Yu was really declining the offer. The Dongfang family had settled down. Next, only the Duanqian Cliffmaster and the ancient bronze tree man were left. After thinking about it, Su Yu used the divine-level transportation portal and arrived at the extreme north. On a cliff that pierced through the clouds, Su Yu saw the Duanqian Cliffmaster, who was recuperating from his injuries. I didn't expect you to actually succeed. It seems like I didn't make a loss this time. The severed fairy cliff master laughed. Su Yu had obviously come to fulfill his promise. In terms of who helped him the most during the tribulation of man, the Duanqian Cliffmaster would be the first. If it weren't for this king of darkness who had entangled the central prefecture's king for 5 whole days, history would have been rewritten. In 6 days, come to the ruins of Central Continent City and board a ship to leave. Hearing this, the Duanqian Cliff Master looked excited and sighed. I can finally leave the Jiuzhou cavern. Su Yu caught a glimpse of a tinge of hatred flashing through his eyes. It seemed that the severed Fairy Cliff Master's visit to the 9 states was not that simple. Okay, then I'll take my leave, Su Yu said. The Duanqian Cliff Master stopped him and said, Wait, I have brought Wu Xia back. Do you want to see her? Little devil? Su Yu smiled gently. Has she been brought back from the desolate, evil jungle? You're not cursing me, are you? He had left the little devil in the desolate, evil jungle and said that he would pick her up after finishing his business. Who knew that things would develop to this point? He had almost forgotten about her. With this little lady's temper, she was probably grinding her teeth in hatred. My daughter just carved a sign with your name on it, and then prayed every day. It was praying. The Duanqian Cliff Master forced a smile. The corner of Su Yu's mouth twitched. Is that a memorial tablet? She's cursing me, isn't she? Amused, Su Yu thought for a moment and took out the glittering jewel fairy scepter. It was covered with cracks and could only be used once more. This is the glittering jewel fairy scepter that I promised to get for Wu Xia. I hope it can help her resolve the effects of the spirit grass of immortality. The Duanqian Cliff Master's eyes lit up, and he accepted it with relief. Thank you, Mr. Su. I hope it will be effective on my daughter. In fact, he knew that to resolve the effects of the spirit grass of immortality was not something that this fairy artifact could do. However, it might not be completely ineffective, and he could still give it a try. I'll take my leave then. Su Yu tore the void apart and left. The next moment, Su Yu arrived at the desolate, evil jungle and appeared directly in the depths of the valley. Inmu rushed over immediately. He was worried that an enemy had invaded. When he saw that it was Su Yu, he couldn't help but say, You've reached the peak of the mortal fairy in such a short time. Unbelievable, unbelievable. He had a stupefied look on his face, trying hard to put on a surprised expression. It was extremely comical. The desolate, evil jungle was isolated from the outside world. He had no idea what had happened in the outside world these days. I want to see the tree goddess. I don't know if I can help her with my current cultivation, Su Yu said. Back then, he was just a small fairy. Now that he was a peak mortal fairy, he didn't know if he could shake the spear that was condensed from evil fatal energy. Inmu nodded cheerfully. Once again, he arrived at the underground magma. A small golden tree was growing in the magma. Su Yu's arrival immediately awakened the remnant soul of the tree goddess on the small tree. However, based on Su Yu's current knowledge, it should be called a trace of godly spirit left behind by the tree goddess. Activate the divine realm, Su Yu said. A pair of eyes opened on the small tree. When he saw that it was Su Yu, a look of delight appeared on his face. Has it been hundreds of years or thousands of years? You've already reached this level of cultivation? He, who was in a deep sleep, didn't know how much time had passed. Su Yu smiled bitterly and remained silent. When the divine realm was activated, he entered it immediately. It was just like what he had seen in the past. A beautiful young lady whose exquisite body was covered with a thin layer of emerald green gauze, was sitting on the throne, sleeping peacefully and sweetly. A long spear that was densely covered with evil fatal energy was pierced through its abdomen. With his current vision, Suyu could clearly sense that the tree goddess's body was densely covered with this kind of evil fatal energy. Fortunately, the godly spirit in the tree goddess's body was continuously producing divine energy, which kept the evil fatal energy at bay. This evil fatal energy belonged to the power of a deity. The Milky Way star San didn't have an artifact spirit, so it could only exert 1/10 of its power. Hence, it couldn't absorb the evil fatal energy. Suyu could only rely on external force to forcibly remove the long spear. Suyu walked forward and grasped the long spear. The evil fatal energy on the long spear tumbled all of a sudden and surged into Suyu's body. Suyu didn't dare to be careless. He condensed the mortal fairy's strength to defend himself. He managed to block the evil fatal energy, but he couldn't block it for too long. Holding the long spear tightly, Suyu exerted strength in his 5 fingers and suddenly pulled it out. Puff! With a dull sound, the long spear was pulled out by force. Only a part of the long spear that was supposed to pierce through the tree goddess's body was still inserted into its abdomen. The godly spirit of the tree goddess who was on the side was pleasantly surprised. "It's out! It's out!" Suyu was speechless for a while. This was not the birth of a child. However, when Suyu tried to pull it out again, the long spear didn't move at all. It was difficult to pull it out again. "Young man, long time no see." Suddenly, a wisp of faint voice came from the girl's body. She was still sleeping, but her voice could be heard. The tree goddess had woken up. Compared with the previous intermittent time, this time the tree goddess's speech was very smooth. It could be seen that her consciousness had been completely awakened. Finally, the eyes that had been closed for many years slowly opened after a slight tremble. It was a pair of beautiful emerald eyes, shining with bright brilliance. With a fresh and bright face, it gave people an indescribable breath of life. Just by looking at those eyes, people felt that the haze in their hearts was gone. Suyu knew that this was the breath of the divine path inadvertently released by the gods, which was extremely easy to affect the perception of others. Immediately, he protected his body with the strength of the mortal fairy. "I finally see you, young man," the girl said slowly. Her voice was pleasant to the ear, like a string of bamboo. She opened her bright eyes and looked at Suyu with a gentle smile on her lips. "So this is what you look like. The last time my consciousness was temporarily awakened, I couldn't perceive the specific situation of the outside world. So after sleeping, I have been thinking about what kind of person you are, what race you are, and what you look like." Suyu did not dare to look directly into her eyes. He said lightly, "I have let the tree goddess down." "No, in the eyes of a god, your appearance is very beautiful, and I like it very much." The tree goddess was generous with her praise. Suyu was a little embarrassed. This tree goddess was quite straightforward. After thinking for a while, he said, "The continent is moving, and the Jiuzhou cavern world is about to become desolate. I am here to inform you in advance. 6 days later, I will take you and your people to board the ship, enter the Xing River world, and leave this place. Well, if you are willing to leave." The tree goddess rubbed her temples with her white fingers and said, "I see. When I was sleeping, I felt that someone had touched the veins of the Jiuzhou continent. It turns out that the whole continent is going to be moved. So I will be homeless?" When she spoke, a pair of beautiful emerald eyes were staring at Suyu. To be honest, the last thing Suyu wanted was to bring the tree goddess into the 9-jade spiritual pearl. With the perception of the tree goddess, he was afraid that the supreme growing soil could not be hidden from her. As a deity, the supreme growing soil was an irresistible temptation. Maybe she would do something, and it was completely possible that she would take the 9-jade spiritual pearl for herself. As a deity, she should not be so shameless, right? Moreover, the long halberd in her abdomen had not been taken out, so she should not dare to be too unscrupulous. I have a small cavern world. I don't know if the tree goddess and my people are willing to accommodate me. I am willing to. The tree goddess said without hesitation. She said with a smile, I am willing to go anywhere you want me to go. Looking at the tree goddess, who did not know how to be modest and polite, Suyu withdrew the polite words that were on the tip of his tongue. Intuition told Suyu that this tree goddess had a temperament that did not match her temperament. Okay, but my cavern world is relatively small. I am afraid it cannot accommodate so many people, and it cannot accommodate the body of the tree goddess. It doesn't matter. The tree goddess waved her small hand. If she was not nailed to the throne, she would have stood up and said, We are so familiar with each other. Just leave the trivial matters to me. Wait for me for a while. Chapter 11:24. Looking at the goddess who was busy casting spells, Suyu was speechless. What happened to her demeanor as a goddess? What happened to her elegance? What happened to her freshness as a tree? What happened to the bold and unrestrained tree goddess? Suyu felt that the beautiful illusion in his mind of the tree goddess's elegance and gentleness had disappeared in an instant. Oh, young man, it's done. The tree goddess made a few simple signs and said with a smile, So fast? Suyu sensed outside the divine land and his mouth twitched. There was no underground lava outside. Where were the ancient bronze tree men? Not to mention a tree, even the ground was scraped away, leaving behind a huge pit that was thousands of feet deep. The body of the ancient bronze tree goddess, the boundless giant tree whose roots covered the bottom of the continent, had also disappeared. The former desolate, evil jungle only had a small golden tree left, floating in the void. Where are they? Suyu asked in surprise. The girl blinked her eyes and said, Of course, I took back my cavern world. Otherwise, what would I do? Suyu did not know where to start. Okay, take me away quickly. The tree goddess did not have the awareness of a guest living under someone else's roof. Instead, she was like a proud pet, urging Suyu to take her home quickly. Suyu was confused. He left the divine land and put the small golden tree floating in the air into the 9-jade spiritual pearl. As soon as he put it in, Suyu's soul, which was attached to the 9-jade spiritual pearl, was shocked by a surprised scream. So much supreme growing soil. Ha ha ha, I'm rich. This is my home from now on. I will fight whoever drives me away. Wow, the 5-colored chaos butterfly. It looks valuable. How about making it into a specimen? Hey, the ghost girl over there, give me some tea. What, you dare to refuse? Don't go. Do you think I can't stand up? Humph. Hearing the chaos in the 9-jade spiritual pearl, Suyu's face darkened. Which bandit nest did this mountain king come from? Just as Suyu was about to return to the central prefecture, the tree goddess's voice rang in his ears. Young man, you should be careful of the curse mark on your body. Suyu's heart skipped a beat. Before the death of the central prefecture's king, he condensed a curse with the power of gods and demons and branded it on Suyu's chest. Because it was god-fiend power, the Milky Way star sand was unable to remove it. The source of the demon god's power seems to be an extraordinary demon god. If he instructs this imprint to find you, you will die very quickly. The tree goddess teased. Suyu asked, Isn't this curse meant to harm my body? Of course not. This is a mark forged with the power of a demon god. As long as you appear within a certain range of that demon god, he will definitely be able to sense your existence. Suyu's heart shuddered, and he asked in a deep voice, How far away can I sense this mark? Not far, maybe half of the galaxy. Unfortunately, you are within his sensing range. The tree goddess gloated. I think he is already on his way. What? Suyu's expression turned serious at once. But don't worry, I've already sealed your imprint. Unless we meet face to face, I won't be able to sense you, the tree goddess added. Su Yu glanced at the imprint with his transparent eyes. As expected, he found that the mark without the mark of the demon god's head was covered by a golden leaf. When did she do that? I didn't sense it at all. Su, you couldn't help but be surprised. Even a peak mortal fairy was like a baby in front of a deity. Even a deity who couldn't even stand up. Well, the muscles on your chest are quite strong. But I don't know if your lower body is also strong. A teasing voice came. Su Yu's face turned red, and he gritted his teeth. You are a scum among people, among trees. What answered him was a string of silvery laughter. Su Yu returned to the central prefecture in a depressed mood. He re-examined the current situation. The old man of the central prefecture's king, a deity who was evaluated as not good by another deity, had already targeted him. Although he had the cover of the tree goddess, the female scum, he was still in great danger. On the way back, Su Yu's cultivation finally slipped down from the peak mortal fairy realm, and it continued to fall at a faster speed. Eventually, his cultivation would slip back to the original level of a stage 9 fairy. Apart from that, there was nothing serious. All he had to do was wait for 6 days when the continent would migrate, and then he would board the ship and leave. What Su Yu didn't know was that his unexpected action had caused a great disturbance in the Milky Way. In the vast and dark Milky Way, countless wild beasts wandered, devouring all the creatures that walked out of the cavern world along the way. Outside the Jojo cavern world, a fiery red boat was floating quietly. There were 2 people on the boat. One of them was a young man who crossed the border with a proud law enforcer to enter Jojo. He was fair-skinned and gentle. At this moment, he was sitting in the boat with a sad face, looking down at the body of the proud young man under his feet. His soul was gone, and only an empty body was left. Meng Ku, did you meet any powerful people in the Jojo cavern world? A middle-aged man in a linen robe was sitting opposite him. His cultivation had reached the terrifying stage for mortal fairy. Meng Ku said, Captain, I received your order to return immediately. Then I grabbed the soul of the demonic god of withered bones and teleported back to the boat. I didn't specifically investigate the powerhouses in the Jojo cavern world. However, during the capture process, I did sense the existence of several mortal fairies, and the strongest one was only at the stage 2 mortal fairy. The middle-aged man in linen shook his head calmly. Impossible. Even if he was besieged by many strong stage 2 mortal fairies, Qin Kue's soul couldn't have escaped. In the Jojo cavern world, there must be peerless powerhouses who are no weaker than me. Meng Ke said in surprise, How do you know? In the Jojo cavern world, the deities have been dead for tens of thousands of years, and the creatures in it live and die on their own. Theoretically, they should be getting weaker and weaker. How could there be someone who is no weaker than you? The middle-aged man in linen sighed. When you were carrying out the task across the border, I sensed the fluctuation of 2 peak mortal fairies. Although it was very weak because of the isolation of the cavern world, I can't be wrong. Even Qin Kue's soul couldn't escape. Most likely, he was killed by the 2 peak mortal fairies. Hiss! How could there be a peak mortal fairy in this decaying cavern world? Meng Ke took a breath. He felt lucky that he kept a low profile when he was in the Jojo cavern world. Otherwise, he would have provoked 2 peak mortal fairies. Qin Kue was a good example. The middle-aged man in linen glanced at the dark Milky Way coldly and sneered. Otherwise, why do you think there were dozens of ships hidden nearby when we came here, but only a few are left now? They were all scared away by the fluctuation of the 2 peak mortal fairies. This was also the reason why the middle-aged man in linen sent an urgent message to ask Meng Ke to come back. The seemingly fallen Jojo cavern world was really a swamp with a hidden giant crocodile. But what about Qin Kue? As a law enforcer, if he died in the process of law enforcement, we can't escape the blame. Moreover, he is from the Qin family, Meng Ke said. The middle-aged man in linen sighed deeply. What else can we do? I have asked the Sanluo law enforcer, who is closest to this place. They will deal with this matter. Let's just wait and see. Hearing the name of the Sinluo law enforcer, Meng Ke's facial muscles twitched. There were many types of law enforcers in the Alliance. Most of them were like them. Their main task was to eliminate the demons that had infiltrated the Alliance. Usually, a strong law enforcer would lead 2 or 3 weaker law enforcers to carry out their tasks. However, there were also a small number of law enforcers who had special identities and were engaged in other special tasks. For example, the Sinluo law enforcers were emissaries who were superior to ordinary law enforcers. Their task was to deal with unexpected incidents. They had the right to take over the tasks of any law enforcement team and punish the members of the law enforcement team who violated the rules. The ordinary law enforcers kept quiet out of fear when faced with this law enforcement team. That's fine. Let them handle it, Meng Ke said. Inadvertently, he noticed that the middle-aged man in linen was sweating nervously on his forehead. Su Yu, who was training silently, resurrected 5 people on the first day. This was the limit of the divine palm of life. They were Gang Dalei, and Yuro and her disciple, Zidonglai and his daughter. On the second day, it was the Phoenix Cabinet's master, Long Jueshin, Lin Yunha, Qiuning Shui, and Elder Liao. Su Yu resurrected a group of people every day. On the 6th day, he resurrected 30 people, all of whom were his old friends. Su Yu felt most gratified during these 6 days. If he had the ability to resurrect the dead earlier, his teacher, Li Guang, could be resurrected too? Su Yu observed Gang Dalei carefully. Except for his golden bones, he didn't find anything special about him. Su Yu was quite confused. After they were resurrected, Su Yu sent them to Jinlong City, which caused a great shock. How did a dead king come back to life? Although they were shocked, they understood the special power of a peak mortal fairy. After all, at their level, the peak mortal fairy was beyond their reach, which was quite mysterious. Su Yu felt relieved. Then he was in the mood to check his status. After 6 days, Su Yu's cultivation had regressed to the stage 1 all creations realm. He had maintained this level for a whole day, which was quite strange. Little brat, congratulations. You have passed the 3 nines ordeal and reached the almighty level. The voice of the evil god appeared in Su Yu's mind. Su Yu was surprised. The 3 nines ordeal is over? Impossible. The love ordeal is in 3 days. How could it be over in advance? I guess it's because of the girl who loves you. Since the ordeal is on her, the ordeal is gone after she left, the evil god said as he smacked his lips. Su Yu asked thoughtfully, will the ordeal disappear by itself? The evil god shook his head. Of course it won't disappear. I just said it is not on you. I didn't say it will disappear. Su Yu was shocked. Do you mean the ordeal is transferred to Xia Jingyu? Chapter 11:25. Su Yu calmed himself down. There was nothing wrong with Xia Jingyu's life jade pendant, which meant that even though she had endured the tribulation of love, her life wasn't in danger. However, if Su Yu did not see Xia Jingyu with his own eyes, he would not be at ease. Jingyu, where are you? Su Yu muttered. Ahem. The evil god said in an untimely manner, well, boy, I am very grateful for the souls you sent me. There are even 4 mortal fairy souls. Previously, Su Yu had promised to give him the soul of a mortal fairy if he helped him achieve the body of 9 dragons. He gave away 4 of them in one go. Normally, I should be thanking you, but among the 4 mortal fairies that you've sent, there's one that even I don't dare to eat easily, the evil god said awkwardly. Su Yu was startled. Who? The law enforcement officer you captured. The tone of the evil god was solemn. How did you capture the law enforcement officer of the Great Eastern Alliance? Don't you know you're in big trouble? Su Yu was surprised. In his opinion, the so-called law enforcers were merely people who maintained order in the Alliance. If they died, so be it. Why would it be a pity? Judging by the man's words and actions, Su Yu was afraid that if he did not die, a great catastrophe would befall him. Looking at Su Yu's expression, The evil god knew what Suyu was thinking. He sighed and said, "Hey boy, come in. Since you are going to leave the JoJo world, someone must tell you some things that you should know. Otherwise, you will be in big trouble without knowing it." Suyu obeyed and entered the soul dimension. He was shocked by what he saw. The evil god was so weak that he was only left with a single drop of blood. He suddenly remembered that 7 days ago, in order to help him refine the cultivation god's bloodline faster, the evil god had instilled his own divine power into him. Could it be that it was that ball of divine energy that caused the heretic god to weaken to such an extent? Suyu sighed with emotion as he stared at the drop of blood. "Haha, if you want to thank me, say it out loud." The evil god laughed. Suyu's grateful look made the evil god a little uncomfortable. "Don't worry. The 3 mortal fairy souls you gave me are enough for me to surpass my previous state. Speaking of which, I've made a profit." That being said, how could the evil god be sure that Suyu would win in the end? How could he be sure that Suyu would give him the mortal fairy's soul if he won? Unknowingly, the two of them had turned from enemies to friends. "All right, tell me." Suyu's thoughts shifted, and he immediately knew the condition of the 4 mortal fairy souls. The souls of the mortal fairies of the 3 prefectures' kings had been devoured, so they looked very weak. Only the law enforcer's soul was completely intact, which showed that the evil god was afraid of him. Suyu suddenly realized that he might have underestimated the law enforcers, when even he was afraid of them. "Can you let him go?" Evil god asked right away. Suyu thought for a while, then slowly shook his head. "No, letting it go will bring endless harm." "All right, I hope you're mentally prepared." The evil god said solemnly, "The Great Eastern Alliance is an alliance of deities spanning a quarter of the Milky Way. There are as many as 100 deities in it." 100 gods? Suyu took in a breath of cold air. Therefore, the Great Eastern Alliance is also known as the Alliance of 100 Deities. The 100 deities advance and retreat together, and the various cavern worlds are connected as one, forming an incomparably vast god realm, said the evil god. Suyu thought for a while and said, "So, was the JoJo cavern world of God Kylin once considered the Great Eastern Alliance?" The evil god smiled. "Yes, but after his death, his name was removed, and the JoJo cavern world was forcibly expelled from the Great Eastern Alliance. Since then, it has become an isolated cavern world, drifting in the Milky Way. The 100 deities are in isolation all year round, or travel outside. Usually, they don't care about the alliance. The 100 deities each elect the strongest in their own cavern world to form 100 law enforcement teams. Each team represents a deity, and they enforce the law in the vast alliance cavern world." Suyu finally understood what the evil god meant. "You mean the law enforcers are not terrible, but the deities behind the law enforcers?" Suyu asked. The evil god nodded seriously. "Exactly. The status of the law enforcers is transcendent, and their words and deeds represent their respective deities. Even other deities have no right to punish the law enforcers, unless the law enforcers violate the law jointly made by the 100 deities, and everyone has the right to punish them. Once a law enforcer is accidentally killed, a special team of law enforcers will come to punish him. This team is called the Sinluo Law Enforcers, which is made up of the descendants of 100 deities. Each of them is a descendant of a deity with the bloodline of a deity, and their cultivation is above the mortal fairy realm. Many of them are at the 3rd stage of the mortal fairy, and some are at the peak of the 4th stage. It's even said that the captain of each generation is a prospective deity. Except for the deities, the Sinluo law enforcers are the most powerful law enforcers in the Great Eastern Alliance. They supervise all the law enforcers, and they have the power to decide the life and death of the law enforcers." Hearing that, Suyu couldn't help but click his tongue. The law enforcers, made up of the descendants of 100 deities, were equal to the imperial guards of 100 deities. When a law enforcer goes missing, a small team of Sinluo law enforcers will come to investigate. They are all descendants of deities, and each of them has the special ability inherited from their bloodlines. If you are found out you killed a law enforcer, you will face a terrible end, which is even more dangerous than being hunted by the Central Prefecture's king. Su Yu became serious. He didn't expect he would attract such a horrible force. So, do you still want to kill him? The evil god asked seriously. Su Yu was lost in thought. After a while he asked, "Now, I have kidnapped him, right? If I let him go, how will the Sanluo law enforcers deal with me?" After a long silence, the evil god said in a low voice, "If you imprison a law enforcer of the Alliance without authorization, you will be enslaved for 100 years and will be released with good behavior. 100 years of enslavement? What's the difference between that and death? As long as the law enforcement officers who had been imprisoned used a little bit of their strength to take revenge on the enslaved, it would be as easy as killing an ant. Judging from the law enforcer who was captured, he was not a broad-minded person. He would die if he was found out, or he would die if he turned himself in. Was there a need to choose? Eat him first, and don't leave any trace." Su Yu's eyes became colder and more vicious. The evil god sighed. "I knew you would choose this path. Well, don't worry, I will clean it up, but you have to be mentally prepared. The descendants of the deities all have special abilities that are unknown to others, and they may find out what you did." When he returned to the outside world, Su Yu's mood became much heavier. The Sanluo law enforcers. Swish! At this moment, the god Kailin walked over. "Hey, your cultivation is stable, and you directly broke through to the All Creations realm?" The god Kailin walked around Su Yu and said in amazement, "Really? In my cavern world, you're not the first to pass the fake 39 ordeals, but you have benefited so much that you directly skipped the almighty level and reached the All Creations realm. This is also the first time I have seen such a great benefit." Su Yu smiled. Just now he had the time to look inside his body. The vital energy in his body had all been transformed into the All Creation's mighty force, which was stored in a small figure in his abdomen. The small figure looked very similar to Su Yu. It was vivid and lifelike, sitting steadily on his abdomen like an old monk in meditation. This was the primordial spirit of the All Creation's old monster. The incomparably huge Dantian from before was replaced by this extremely clear primordial spirit. However, upon closer inspection, Su Yu discovered that there were actually 8 holes on the surface of his primordial spirit. He couldn't help but worry that his primordial spirit had some problems due to the rapid progress of his cultivation. What? 8 orifices primordial soul? The sacred Kailin, who was sizing up Su Yu, seemed to have discovered something. Then he was shocked. 8 orifices primordial spirit? Su Yu relaxed slightly, as it didn't seem like something bad had happened. "You, brat, are you really the reincarnation of a monster? Tell me, how big was your Dantian when you were in the fairy realm?" Sacred Kailin was amazed. Su Yu mulled it over for a moment, then said, "If I calculated according to the average level 9 fairy standard, then I'm about 80 times larger than them." 80 times. The sacred Kailin clicked his tongue. No wonder he has cultivated the primordial spirit of 8 apertures. My goodness, a primordial spirit with multiple orifices that can only be born in the top 10 cavern worlds is actually born in my cavern world. Are there differences between primordial spirits? Su Yu asked. The sacred Kailin rolled his eyes. What do you think? 1 more aperture is equivalent to 1 more channel to absorb the spiritual energy of the world and transform it into the all-creation mighty force, which can double the speed of cultivation. Ordinary all-creation old monsters usually have 1 aperture, and it's not easy for them to have 2 apertures. 3 apertures are considered to be extremely talented, and 4 apertures are considered to be top-notch heaven rulers. As for 5 apertures, only the destined Emperor Zhan Wushuang can achieve that in my cavern world. Su Yu said, "Is Zhan Wushuang a person derived from your celestial energy sphere? How could he be so powerful?" The sacred Kylin stared at Suyu. You are a person born in a small world that I created randomly. You have 8 apertures, and you still doubt the origin of someone who has 5 apertures? He looked angry, as if Suyu was trying to catch a thief. However, this is just my speculation. When he breaks through the all-creation realm, it's unknown how many apertures he will have. He hasn't broken through the all-creation realm. Suyu vaguely remembered that Zhan Wushuang had been suppressing his cultivation. Could it be that he wanted to expand the Almighty's fetal crystal and achieve the primordial spirit with multiple apertures like Suyu? Speaking of which, Suyu remembered another person who was also suppressing the cultivation of the Almighty. In another half a day, the all-access ship will arrive outside the Jojo cavern world. Get ready. When the time comes, I will immediately move the whole continent. Then, you can board the ship and leave immediately. We have to complete the arrangement as soon as possible. Suyu nodded. Then he gathered the Ghost Clan, the Great Oriental Family, and the Severed Fairy Cliff. Then he ordered them to enter the 9 Jade Spiritual Pearl in an orderly manner. The sacred Kylin was also waiting patiently. He had opened up the separated worlds in the 100-story Marshall Tower and connected them into a cavern world that was far larger than Jojo. He was just waiting to move the Jojo continent into it. They were all busy. In the land of the far west, in the depths of a haze. Chapter 11:26. There were 2 other people on the boat. One was Han Xian, who looked very sad, and the other was Gu Taishu. Senior brother, how did Master die? Who killed him? Han Xian asked. After she was captured by Qin Xianer and her cultivation deity bloodline was taken away, Zhan Wushuang suddenly appeared and saved her. Gu Taishu asked in surprise, Brother Zhan, did those 2 extraterrestrial experts kill him? He recalled the day when the sword from beyond the sky destroyed the central prefecture city. If Zhan Wushuang hadn't sensed it in advance and taken Gu Taishu away, he would have been killed there. Zhan Wushuang stood at the bow of the boat with his hands clasped behind his back. He snorted coldly, Death is death. The winner takes all. Master was not as good as the winner. What's there to take revenge for? They had been hiding in the far west all this time and didn't know anything about the outside world. Zhan Wushuang knew who killed the Central Prefecture's king, but he didn't want to take revenge. In his opinion, the Central Prefecture's king had lost, so his death was not a pity. Let's go now. This boat floated here from the Star River when I was 10 years old when I traveled to the far west. I've been hiding it until today. As the close friends of the Central Prefecture's king, we can't stay in Jojo anymore. If we don't leave now, we may not be able to. Zhan Wushuang said. Han Xian grasped the side of the boat tightly and said nothing. In fact, she wasn't as sad as she thought, especially when Qin Xianer forced her to complete the Jade Maiden Heavenly Frost art. When she knew the Central Prefecture's king's intention, she became much more clear-headed. He was sad because another person he was familiar with had died. Han Xian didn't care about Jojo anymore. Gu Taishu clenched his teeth and said angrily, What a pity! I finally perfected the body of 9 spirits and haven't fought with Suyu yet. It's a pity to let him go like this. Zhan Wushuang glanced at him and shook his head calmly. You'd better not fight with him. What? Gu Taishu looked at Zhan Wushuang strangely. Was he not strong enough to defeat Suyu after reaching the level of all creations? Since you have no objection, let's go now. Gu Taishu started the boat and was about to leave. However, at this moment, a huge fog surged out from the depths of the far west, forcing the desolate beasts to avoid it. Zhan Wushuang's eyes narrowed. He saw a mountain-like ship break through the clouds, crushing countless desolate beasts along the way until it arrived in front of them. At the bow of the huge ship stood a woman wearing a green feather cloak. The woman's expression was cold and indifferent. Although she was beautiful, she had a haughty air that kept people at a distance. Behind the woman stood a few young men in uniform. standing behind her in an extremely respectful manner, and the cultivation of each of those young men was comparable to the prefecture kings of the 9 prefectures. As for the woman in the lead, if Zhan Wushuang had not seen her with his own eyes, he would not have been sure if she was on the ship. Jiuzhou Cavern World, listen up. The Sanluo law enforcement team is here to investigate the disappearance of the Alliance law enforcers. Before the conclusion is reached, no creature is allowed to leave the cavern world. Half a day was almost up. The sacred Kylin was very nervous. Finally, the migration had begun. In the Jiuzhou continent, except for the desolate west continent, the other 4 continents slowly rose from the depths of the ground. To Suyu's surprise, the central continent's pillar was not shot at the central prefecture, but at the outer sanctum of the Red Blood Palace. And this pillar was no stranger to Suyu. It was the carp leaping over the Dragon Gate stone pillar at the entrance of the outer sanctum. Suyu could not help but be surprised. No wonder the outer sanctum attached great importance to that stone pillar. Even when the ghost army arrived and Mo Tianxian destroyed the outer sanctum, the stone pillar was not touched. So that was it. The 4 pillars were shaped like a dragon's claw, grabbing the entire Jiuzhou continent. In an instant, the space around the Jiuzhou continent collapsed, and the whole world fell into collapse. In the depths of the sky, a dark entrance was exposed at the base of a huge tower. The entire Jiuzhou continent was grabbed by the carp leaping over and gradually disappeared into the dark base of the tower. The creatures on the Jiuzhou continent did not notice the drastic changes of the continent at all. They were just surprised that the day suddenly turned into night. It was not until the entire Jiuzhou continent disappeared into the world of the martial arts tower that they saw the light again. Was it a solar eclipse just now? It's so strange. Why did the sky suddenly turn dark? Many people were talking about it. Only the creatures on the edge of the continent were shocked. Where did the sea disappear? How did it become a continent in front of us? Look, what kind of species is that? Why haven't I seen it before? The Jiuzhou continent was completely moved into the world of the martial arts tower, and Suyu finally settled the 4 forces in the 9 jade spiritual pearl. However, Suyu was slightly surprised that Mo Tianxian was also rejected by the world of the martial arts tower. What are you looking at? Mo Tianxian raised her snow-white chin and provoked. Suyu shrugged. If you want to leave Jiuzhou, it seems that you have to enter my 9 jade spiritual pearl. Is it really okay to be so arrogant? He was used to fighting with Mo Tianxian, and Mo Tianxian was used to opposing Suyu. The 2 of them stared at each other, and neither of them was willing to admit defeat. Ahem, you too. Even if you want to flirt, you should look at the time. The ship is about to leave. What are you still doing here? The sacred Kylin was holding a small tower in his mouth. It was the world of the martial arts tower that contained the entire Jiuzhou continent. Who's flirting? Mo Tianxian showed her silver teeth. The sacred Kylin shivered and said embarrassedly, "Anyway, stop fooling around. Whether we can leave smoothly or not depends on this moment. Let's go to the far west first." Suyu nodded and flew to the far west with the sacred Kylin and Mo Tianxian. In the entire Jiuzhou continent, only the forbidden areas occupied by the Star River and the wild beasts existed. The rest of the places were just a pitch-black void. From today on, the Jiuzhou cavern world would be an empty shell. As soon as they landed in the far west, Suyu frowned. It doesn't seem right. When I came here last time, this place was full of wild beasts. Why is there no sign of life now? Suyu had the heart of eternity, so his perception of life couldn't be calculated by common sense. Mo Tianxian, who was a stage 3 mortal fairy, couldn't sense the abnormality, but Suyu could easily detect it. The sacred Kylin frowned deeply. Something is wrong indeed. The far west is different from the past. Even the Jiuzhou deity said so. Mo Tianxian became cautious. She squinted her eyes and looked around. Suddenly she shouted softly, "Who is in front of us? Come out!" Buzz, buzz, buzz. The sound of trees being pushed could be heard. Looking over in the fog, a huge ship slowly floated over. On the side of the ship, a small black boat was hanging. On the boat, a young woman in a feather cloak was standing. Behind her were several young mortal fairies with strong auras. At the stern of the ship, 3 people were standing. To be exact, they were Zhan Wushuang and the other 2 who were under house arrest. As the giant ship approached, Su Yu and the others were under great pressure. "We've been waiting for you for a while." The woman in the feather cloak stood at the bow of the ship and looked at Su Yu and the others calmly. When she glanced at the sacred Kylin, she said, "I was wondering who moved the whole continent. It turns out you are the Jiuzhou deity. I am He Xianran, the descendant of the crane deity. Greetings, sacred Kylin." She called the sacred Kylin Senior, but she just stood there with her hands clasped behind her back. The few young men behind the woman revealed mocking smiles. "Miss Xianran, aren't you afraid of scaring this sacred Kylin by calling yourself a junior?" "Ha ha ha. I'm afraid. He is very happy. He has been dead for 10,000 years. Someone still knows him. It's no wonder he is happy." He Xianran waved her hand to ask them to be quiet with a faint smile on her face. Looking at the sacred Kylin, who was getting more and more embarrassed, she said calmly, "Sacred Kylin, I am the 80th member of the Sanluo Law Enforcing Team. Today, I am here to investigate the disappearance of Qinhua, a member of the demon-killing law enforcing team. I hope you can cooperate with me." As a deity who had lived for countless years, the sacred Kylin was quite shrewd. She stopped being unhappy and said coldly, "Qinhua, a member of the law enforcing team? Well, I have sensed 2 auras from outside. As for the missing one, I didn't know who took him away." He Xianran's eyes were as black as ink. She said sharply, "Sacred Kylin, do you think I waited patiently for you to move the whole continent without any purpose? Do you want to take away the world of the martial arts tower?" The sacred Kylin's face changed slightly. He Xianran said with a smile, "You are wrong. Since all the creatures have been taken into the world of the martial arts tower, the suspects must be among them. We just want to take away the martial arts tower and interrogate the creatures in it. We don't want to take it away. We will return it to you later." Once the martial arts tower was taken away by the Sanluo law enforcing team, the sacred Kylin wouldn't be able to get it back in the future. Who would care about a deity who had been dead for 10,000 years? Perhaps this crane Xianran wanted to take advantage of this to openly occupy the 9 regions as her own. The central prefecture's king was driven away, and now He Xianran came, and the identity of the latter was even more troublesome. You can investigate, but you can't suspect all the creatures, right? Just tell me who you suspect, and I will hand over the creatures in it to you. The sacred Kylin insisted on not handing over the world of the martial arts tower. To the sacred Kylin's surprise, He Xianran nodded and said, "As a junior, I should respect the sacred Kylin. Otherwise, my father will punish me for being rude to the deities of the former alliance. I think there are 3 possible suspects," He Xianran said with a smile. The sacred Kylin's eyes lit up. "Which 3? He Xianran said calmly, "The 3 of you, sacred Kylin, and the 2 human cultivators beside you." Hearing that, the sacred Kylin was furious. This is going too far. After capturing the 3 of them, the martial pagoda world would still fall into their hands. Chapter 11:27. Su Yu's eyes were full of killing intent. In this world, there was no law enforcer who was completely righteous. As a law enforcer of the Sanluo law enforcer, he seized the cavern world with the fiery bright staff. What was the difference between him and the evildoers? Swish! The 3 young men at the bow of the ship sneered and flew down with the strength of mortal fairies. One of them walked toward Su Yu. He didn't look like a human being because of the vague shadow of green wings on his back. Is he a demon? Suyu thought to himself. Clang! The young mortal fairy took out a pair of shackles from the storage space and threw them at Suyu's feet. Then he looked at the other two places and said indifferently, Handcuff yourself. Don't make me do it. In his opinion, a strong man of stage one of all creations was not worthy of being treated seriously at all. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew towards him. The young mortal fairy reacted very quickly. Before he turned his head, he had already thrown out his palm to block the man who was attacking him. When he turned his head and looked at the attacker, he was slightly surprised. What? How dare you attack me? It was quite surprising that a stage 1 all creations dared to attack a strong man of mortal fairy. With a hideous smile on his face, a strand of mortal fairy's strength rushed out of his palm. He was going to destroy Suyu's palm. However, when they collided, his palm was suddenly covered with a layer of golden scales. Then, a strand of terrifying golden power gushed out from his palm. His tiny bit of mortal fairy's strength dispersed like clouds and mist. The golden beam penetrated his palm, crushed his arm, and rushed out from his shoulder blade. If he hadn't reacted in time, his head would have been pierced by this force. Even so, his entire right arm was crippled from then on. As the followers of He Xianran, although they were not members of the Sanluo law enforcer, they had carried out many dangerous tasks. So they reacted quickly, his remaining left hand toward the space behind him. Then he stepped on the ground and disappeared into the void. Then he teleported to a safe place. At this time, he healed his arm by using the mortal fairy strength. During this process, his eyes were fixed on Suyu, which showed his extremely rich combat experience. The carelessness on his face disappeared completely. Then he stared at Suyu's arm, which was covered with scales, and said calmly, Did you implant the real spirit dragon veins in your body? I was too careless. However, this is the end. Shwa! The young mortal fairy moved like a phantom and appeared in front of Suyu instantly. Then he pointed his finger at Suyu. This finger contained 70% of the mortal fairy's strength. He had chosen to use all his strength to suppress Suyu quickly. Moreover, all of the power was concentrated on a single point. Unless the point was missed, once hit, even if one did not die, they would be heavily injured. Suyu's face was calm, and he replied indifferently, To Dragon's body. Even when facing the Central Prefecture's king, he didn't use too much of the power of the real spirit dragon veins, because in a battle at that level, the dragon power would be enhanced by his cultivation, and the power of one dragon was enough. Now that his cultivation had fallen back to the Wanxiang realm, there was a need for him to unleash the power of the 9 dragons' body. Under the twin dragon body, 2 thick golden veins appeared on Suyu's arms. He channeled the strength in his arms into his fist and punched out like a flood dragon. With a muffled sound, the young mortal fairy's expression changed. He took a few steps back to stop himself from retreating. Your real spirit dragon veins are extraordinary. The young mortal fairy found he had underestimated Suyu. Fine, it's been a long time since I've used my full strength. The young mortal fairy shook his sore fingers and took a light breath. The mortal fairy's strength in his body was rolling like boiling water. The young mortal fairy's aura changed completely. He growled in a low voice, Demon, subduing ring. All of a sudden, all the mortal fairy strength was condensed into a ring of light in his palm, which was imprinted on Suyu's chest. Suyu was still calm, and he said indifferently, 3 dragons' body. At this moment, the huge golden dragon veins on his chest suddenly shone, and a yellow light beam shot out from his chest. At the same time, Suyu punched out with both of his fists. The 2 light beams merged with the light beam on his chest and condensed into a huge light beam as thick as a neck. Then the light beam shot straight out. The light beam, condensed by the mortal fairy strength, was smashed into pieces. Mortal fairy Qingyu was shocked. What kind of dragon veins did you transplant? Even the transplanted peak mortal fairy dragon veins shouldn't be so powerful. He didn't know these dragon veins came from a prospective deity, divine dragon. So you didn't answer. Instead, he murmured in a low voice, "For dragon's body." Suddenly, a golden light burst out from his right leg. For golden light beams shot out at the same time and hit the chest of the young mortal fairy fiercely. Although he used the mortal fairy's strength to resist in time, he was still smashed by the remaining light beam, and his chest was smashed into pieces. Suyu didn't show any mercy. He took a step forward and smashed the young mortal fairy into pieces with his palms. Only the soul of the young mortal fairy escaped quickly. Xianran, who was walking into the cabin, raised her eyebrows slightly. What? She withdrew half of her body from the cabin, turned around, and looked out of the ship coldly. Staring at Suyu, her pretty face was a little angry. Her man was beaten by a junior of all creations, and only his soul was left? What are you waiting for? She was surprised. The remaining 3 young mortal fairies on the bow got off the ship one after another. Seeing this, God Kylan's face changed slightly. "Miss Mo, Suyu is in danger." "Mo," Tanxian said calmly, "don't worry, he won't die." As she said this, she forced back the 2 young mortal fairies who were close to God Kylan and herself with a sword. Somehow, with Mo Tianchuan's strength, it was easy for her to kill the 2 young mortal fairies. However, she didn't use any killing moves. The 2 mortal fairies who didn't notice this at all thought the cold and arrogant woman in black in front of them was too weak. At the same time, 3 young mortal fairies rushed toward Suyu. Although they were all mortal fairies, Suyu was no longer a peak mortal fairy. 5 dragons' body open. 6 dragons' body open. 7 dragons' body open. Suyu opened the 7 dragons' body. His whole body was shining with golden light, and a stream of dragon power was rolling in his meridians. The 3 strong mortal fairies didn't dare to be careless, and all of them tried their best. They cooperated well. 2 of them attacked from the left and right side, and the other one attacked from a distance with a crossbow, which was a low-grade fairy artifact. 7 light beams shot out from Suyu's body at the same time. 3 of them shot towards the mortal fairies in the distance, and the other 4 attacked the 2 people who were close to him on both sides. Bang! It was not difficult for the young mortal fairies on both sides to deal with the 2 light beams when they tried their best. After destroying the light beams, they attacked Suyu's vital parts fiercely. It seemed they didn't want to leave Suyu alive. However, the corners of Suyu's mouth revealed a cold smile. 9 dragons, devil-subduing art, Suyu shouted in a low voice. Suddenly, a formation with complicated patterns appeared above the head of the young mortal fairy on the left side. It was as large as 10,000 feet. In the formation, an aura that could even make the mortal fairies tremble came out. Hearing the roar of the dragon, everyone's heart skipped a beat. Then, a pitch-black light flashed in the formation, and the young mortal fairy under the formation disappeared. In the place where he stood, there was a huge demonic dragon which was hundreds of feet thick and tens of thousands of feet long. The size of this demonic dragon was much larger than before. Above its neck, there were 9 demonic dragons' heads. As for the young mortal fairy, he was torn into pieces by the 9 heads of the demonic dragons. Even his soul was not left behind. He was eaten directly. Suyu was also stunned. In the past, the demonic dragon was condensed by the demonic energy, but the demonic dragon in front of him seemed to be a living creature. The 9-headed demonic dragon of the demon realm. "Are you a demon?" Xianran squinted her eyes, which were full of dangerous light. Even Suyu couldn't understand why the last level of this magic art could summon the 9-headed demonic dragon of the demon realm directly. He couldn't help but think of Yun Yazi's words. This magic art was not as simple as Suyu thought. However, it was not the time to think about this. The young mortal fairy on the right side was stunned for a moment, and then he attacked Suyu with gritted teeth. Suyu snorted coldly. Then he grabbed with his right palm, and 9 pitch-black scorching suns surrounded Suyu's arm. As he patted with his right palm, 9 pitch-black scorching suns suddenly appeared. Puff! The young mortal fairy didn't even have time to scream before he was turned into ashes. After killing 2 mortal fairies, Suyu's murderous intention didn't diminish. He teleported to the front of the mortal fairy. He was trying his best to resolve the 3 light beams. When he saw Suyu killed 2 mortal fairies in a row like a god of slaughter, he was so scared that his heart shrank. Then he stepped back and said, "Lady Xianran, help me." Suyu snorted coldly. Then 7 light beams were shot out from his body. The 7 light beams combined into a golden light beam which was 5 feet thick. Then it penetrated the young mortal fairy. When the young mortal fairy was about to be killed, a ray of white light flashed. Xianran, who was standing on the bow of the ship, lifted her white feather cloak. Then she appeared in front of the young mortal fairy like a graceful white crane. She stretched out her arms like crane feathers and waved them up and down. Vaguely, it seemed that a pair of white crane wings were flapping. When the wings were flapping, a more magnificent mortal fairy strength, which was controlled by the wings, rushed towards the light beam which was about 5 feet high. This mortal fairy strength was not very strong. However, under the control of the wings, it constantly disintegrated the light beam as if it had a strong restraint on the light beam. At the same time, the wave-like mortal fairy strength continued to move towards Suyu. When Suyu tried to resolve it, he realized the mystery of it. Before the first layer of mortal fairy strength was resolved, the subsequent mortal fairy strength was overlaid and then overlaid again, until the mortal fairy's strength couldn't bear the overlaid mortal fairy strength. He fell down in the infinite mortal fairy strength. To deal with this move, the only way was to break through the mortal fairy strength before the mortal fairy strength was overlaid. 8 Dragon's body. Open! Suyu shouted in a low voice. Then, his left eye turned into a golden light. However, this was not enough. 9 Dragon's body. Open! Suddenly, Suyu's right eye was also covered by a golden light. The 9 great dragon veins hidden in his body were all opened. All of a sudden, Suyu was like a golden figure. He shouted, and 9 light beams were shot out from his body at the same time. Chapter 11:28. Bang! With a deafening sound, Xianran's strength of mortal fairy was penetrated by the light beam and hit on her chest. Xianran was knocked back by the light beam. Her pretty face was full of horror. As a Stage 2 mortal fairy, she couldn't defeat a Stage 1 all creations. She couldn't believe it if she didn't try it herself. Let's go! Xianran turned around and jumped onto the ship. The young mortal fairies who were fighting also returned to the ship. Mo Tianxian didn't chase them. It seemed she was afraid of something. Suyu didn't chase them either because they had more important things to do. The ship of the All-Access Chamber of Commerce was coming. They could hear the loud horn sound from afar, which was informing the passengers who were going to board the ship to get ready. God Kylan also said, "Forget it. After all, she is the descendant of the crane deity. The crane deity won't let her go if she is killed." God Kylan opened his mouth and took out the ship ticket and the world of the martial arts tower. He said, "Get ready to board the ship. Miss Mo and I will enter your 9 jade spiritual pearl." However, a white light flashed by before he finished his words. It was so fast that Mo Tianxian, who was a Stage 3 mortal fairy, couldn't react in time. She shouted and waved her sword. At the same time, she grabbed something in the void with her right hand. With a groan, several white feathers, which were stained with red and golden blood, fell to the ground. On the bow of the ship, Xianran covered her right arm, which was bleeding. However, she sneered. In her right arm, she grabbed a palm-sized living thing. It was none other than God Kylan. God Kylan was taken away by her. More importantly, the ship ticket was still in his hand. He Xianran stared at Mo Tianxian with fear. When she looked at the martial arts tower in Mo Tianquan's hand, her face darkened. She used the magical power of the crane deity to take away God Kylin in a flash. Originally, she planned to take away God Kylin along with the martial arts tower and the ship ticket. However, this woman in black hid her cultivation of stage 3 mortal fairy. Not only did she hurt her, but she also took back the world of the martial arts tower. He Xianran stared at them coldly. She had no intention of exchanging the sacred Kylin for the world of martial arts tower. She ordered, "Set sail quickly and inform the nearest Sunluo law enforcing team. They don't have tickets, so they can't leave the 9 regions cavern world." She didn't want to give them a chance to live at all. Instead, she wanted to gather her strength and capture them all in one fell swoop. What a vicious woman! There was no enmity between them, so he had to kill them. He and Mo Tianxian could only watch helplessly as the ship left, but they could not set foot on it. This was because the dire beasts had appeared again after the ship left. Without tickets, they could only sit and wait for death, waiting for He Xianran to find helpers to annihilate them in one fell swoop. A cold gleam flashed across Mo Tianquan's eyes, and she said coldly, "The crane deity? You raised such a good daughter." Su Yu raised his brows. "Do you have a way to overtake them?" "No," Mo Tianxian said angrily. She sat cross-legged on the ground, looking as if she was waiting for them to come and fight them with all her might. Su Yu was disappointed. Although Mo Tianxian was powerful, she had exposed her cultivation at the last moment. So, how could the enemy give them another chance? Moreover, he didn't know what happened to the sacred Kylin. Although the sacred Kylin was taken away suddenly, so you still clearly saw that the sacred Kylin threw down the world of the martial arts tower at the moment of being taken away, so that Mo Tianxian could take back the world of the martial arts tower. The Jojo continent was the sacred Kylin's lifelong effort. He would rather his last celestial energy sphere be taken away than the Jojo continent in the martial arts tower. Sacred Kylin. Su Yu was worried. As a deity of the Jojo continent, he still cared about the Jojo continent after his death. Because of his persistence, Su Yu couldn't stand by and watch him die. The longer it was in the hands of the enemy, the more dangerous the situation would be for the sacred Kylin. He had to find a way to find He Xianran as soon as possible. However, without tickets, they could not even leave the Jojo continent. Woo! The horn of the giant ship was getting closer, and they could already vaguely see a giant merchant ship slowly sailing towards them. The size of the merchant ship was more than 100 times that of He Xianran's ship. Looking from afar, it seemed that a city was flying towards them. The ship was coming, but they didn't have tickets to board it. If they couldn't feel the aura of the ticket, the giant ship would pass by the Jojo continent and never stop. Hearing the horn gradually getting farther away, Su Yu's mind was filled with thoughts. Tickets, tickets! Suddenly, a flash of lightning flashed in Su Yu's mind. He took out a picture scroll from the 9 jade spiritual pearl excitedly. After unfolding it, he was surprised to see that it was a beautiful woman. The picture scroll was very old, but it couldn't conceal the aura of the scroll itself. Mo Tianxian glared at him. What can this picture do? It's not a ticket, however. As soon as she finished speaking, the horn of the merchant ship that was gradually getting farther away came back. A huge black shadow stepped through the layers of fog and approached them slowly. It was a merchant ship that was entirely white jade, and the words "All Access" were engraved on the ship. From the ship, a rope ladder as long as 10,000 feet fell straight in front of Su Yu. Mo Tianxian stared at the picture scroll in Su Yu's palm in astonishment. How could this be a ticket? How could he summon the merchant ship successfully, get into the 9 jade spiritual pearl? After putting Mo Tianxian into the pearl, Su Yu boarded the giant merchant ship along the ladder immediately. At the entrance of the ladder, 2 mortal fairies were guarding it. After glancing at Suyu expressionlessly, they took back the ladder and didn't check the ticket. The giant ship had a formation that could detect the ticket. Therefore, it was not necessary to check the authenticity of the ticket. If they were in a bad mood, they would check the ticket. If they were in a good mood, they wouldn't bother to check the ticket. After all, there had never been a fake ticket. Suyu let out a sigh of relief secretly. If he really checked the ticket, this picture scroll of Xia Jingyu was really inexplicable. When the sacred Kailan took out the ticket and showed it to Suyu, he felt the aura of the ticket was quite familiar. It wasn't until a moment ago that he suddenly remembered that Xia Jingyu's painting was emitting the same aura as hers. This scroll was obtained by the 3rd Deputy Region Master of the Heavenly Knife region in the Far West region by chance. Why did it emit the aura of the all-access merchant ship ticket? According to the sacred Kailan, the most important reason why the ticket couldn't be copied was that a special material was mixed in the ticket. Did this strange aura happen to exist in the picture scroll? There were many people on the deck of the giant ship. It was not convenient for Suyu to study it on the spot. So he walked into the cabin without looking sideways. There were many vacant lounges in the cabin, which could be used for free. Suyu chose a slightly spacious lounge. After entering the lounge, Suyu released Mo Tianxian immediately. "How much do you know about this ship?" Suyu asked directly. Mo Tianxian glanced at Suyu. She knew this was not the time to argue with him. So she said, "This ship will go to the Great Eastern Alliance. It should arrive in 6 months." Suyu's eyes lit up. "If they catch up with us, will the owner of this ship hand us over?" Mo Tianxian nodded without hesitation. "Yes, the Senluo law enforcing team has the privilege to rule over all living beings. If they want to hand us over, the all-access merchant ship won't refuse." Suyu asked again, "So, is there anything on this ship that the Senluo law enforcing team has no right to interfere with?" Mo Tianxian was stunned a bit. Then she said, "Except for people, the Senluo law enforcing team has no right to interfere with anything. The merchant ship is the link between the Great Eastern Alliance and the Star River. It is very important. Even deities dare not let their descendants disturb it. Therefore, except for people on the ship, the Senluo law enforcing team has no right to deal with the ship and other things. If they violate this rule, they will be disqualified from being a member of the Senluo law enforcing team immediately." "Is that so?" Suyu was lost in thought. 1 month later, in the land of the far west of the Jojo world, Xianran returned. In addition to her, there were 2 ships following behind her, one big and one small. On the small ship, Meng Ku and the middle-aged man in linen were standing. On the big ship, another Senluo law enforcing team was standing with his subordinates. He was a short and fat man in his 20s. He was very ugly. There was a sarcoma on his forehead. Because of the pressure of the sarcoma, his left eyelid had to be closed. Only his right eye could be used. He looked like a one-eyed man. However, his cultivation was exceptional. He had the cultivation of a 3rd stage mortal fairy. The middle-aged man in linen was at the stage for mortal fairy level. Xianran at the stage 2 mortal fairy level and 7 or 8 subordinates at the stage 1 mortal fairy level. "Where are they?" Xianran tried to sense the surroundings. However, she couldn't sense their aura at all in the land of the far west. The one-eyed man said in a hoarse voice, "Fairy He, are you sure they don't have tickets?" Xianran nodded her head and said, "I have searched the soul of God Kailan. There is only one ticket, which was taken away by me. Moreover, there is no other divine bone ship that can cross the Star River in Jujo." Looking at the broken void, Xianran's eyes lit up. She said, "Send out all the subordinates to search the whole Jujo world. I guess they are hiding in the void." Swish, 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 swish. 7 or 8 figures flew away. Xianran, the one-eyed man, and the middle-aged man in linen were still on the ship. The one-eyed man praised, "Fairy He, you are very smart. You are very good at catching the snake by cuddling the grass. If your subordinates alert them, they will probably seize our ship and escape. However, they don't know that everything is within our expectation. We're just waiting for them. You flatter me, Master Jing. How can a small trick like this be noticed by you? He Xianran was in awe and fear of this man. Not only was he ranked 70th in the Sinluo law enforcing team, but more importantly, his father was also one of the top 50 deities in the Great Eastern Alliance. He Xianran's father, the crane deity, usually relied on young Master Jing's father, the Jing deity. Therefore, she had to be polite to him. You flatter me. Fairy, he is exceptionally intelligent, and I've admired you for a long time. As he spoke, the one-eyed man got closer and sniffed Fairy his fragrance. He said intoxicatedly, "Why don't you do me a favor? After this matter is over, you and I can find a quiet place to drink wine and admire the moon. How about that?" Chapter 11:29. But it was only a matter of time. Thinking that she was going to marry such a greedy, lustful, and ugly man, he Xianran suddenly felt that it would be great if he died. Suddenly, a scream came from the void far away. A subordinate of Stage 1 Mortal Fairy was killed. They are coming. He Xianran became serious. The one-eyed dragon's expression changed from casual to serious. He squinted his eyes and said, "The two people you mentioned seem to be quite powerful. One of them is a third realm mortal fairy, and the other is just an all-creation realm mortal fairy, but he can fight evenly with you, a second realm mortal fairy." Before he finished his words, another scream came. "They are coming toward us." The one-eyed man said, "I haven't seen such a reckless guy for a long time. How dare he fight against the Sinluo law enforcing team?" He Xianran was also on guard. She shouted, "Songtae, you can handle the Stage 3 Mortal Fairy Woman, and the All-Creation Realm guy can be handled by me and Mr. Jing." The middle-aged man in linen was Songtae, a law enforcement captain of a deity. He was also recruited by the Sinluo law enforcing team to deal with Mo Tianxian. Unlike them, Songtae stared at the vast void and frowned. "Lord Envoys, I feel that there's something fishy about this. If they want to seize our ship, why did they kill the law enforcers who entered it? Wouldn't it be better for them to sneak around those law enforcers and attack us?" What he said was reasonable. He Xianran and the one-eyed man also felt that something was wrong. Just as they were guessing, a beautiful woman with white hair, purple lips, and red eyes suddenly stepped through the pitch-black void like a nightmare, sneering coldly as she walked over. There was blood at the corner of her mouth. Seeing this woman, Songtae, he Xianran, and the one-eyed man recognized her immediately. "Demon!" The three of them were shocked. "Ha! Ha! Ha! Thank you for sending me 2 Mortal Fairies tonics. Otherwise, I am afraid I can't defeat you." With the help of the hearts and souls of the 2 Mortal Fairies, the glittering Jewel Mortal Fairy recovered more than half of her strength. Songtae flew over and shouted, "Demon, how dare you be so arrogant in the territory of the human race?" As a Stage 4 Mortal Fairy, Songtae's combat power was honed through years of fighting with the demon clan. The glittering Jewel Mortal Fairy didn't dare to be careless. After a few rounds, the glittering Jewel Mortal Fairy only had a slight upper hand, but she couldn't do anything to Songtae. "Get out of the way!" the glittering Jewel Mortal Fairy scolded. Then she struck her palm and pushed him back. She then flew toward the 3 Divine Bone ships. If she continued to be entangled here, it would obviously be disadvantageous to her. If another team of enforcers came, it would be extremely difficult for her to leave. "Oh no, she's going to steal the Divine Bone ship." Songtae steadied himself and immediately rushed over. The glittering Jewel Mortal Fairy had already jumped onto the ship that belonged to He Xianran. Without even looking at her, she raised her palm and was about to kill her. How could He Xianran block the attack of a peak Mortal Fairy? However, Songtae could not save him in time. At the critical moment, the beautiful eyes of He Xianran flashed a trace of ruthlessness. Unexpectedly, She grabbed the one-eyed dragon, who had hurriedly dodged, and put him in front of her. Due to the activation of the crane deity's bloodline, the one-eyed dragon didn't even have time to react, and was quickly pulled to his chest, barely blocking the palm that should have killed Xianran. Puff! The one-eyed dragon's eyes darkened. He didn't even have a chance to resist, and his soul was smashed into pieces. When the glittering jewel mortal fairy was about to kill Xianran again, Songtiei had already rushed over. The glittering jewel mortal fairy had to give up. She waved her sleeve and pushed Xianran off the stage. Then she started the warship and sailed into the Star River immediately. Songtiei rushed over, but it was too late. He turned back to check on the one-eyed dragon, and was shocked to find that Xianran had pushed his body into the Star River, where it was devoured by the wild beasts. Fairy, looking at the woman in front of him, Songtiei's eyes were full of viciousness. Even as a man, he felt a chill down his spine. Xianran regained her elegance and elegance. Then she said indifferently, "On the 4th day of the 10th month of the 3500 th year of the Alliance calendar in the 9 Dragon Cave world, several creatures of the 9 provinces killed the enforcers without permission and resisted the investigation of the Sanluo law enforcer. In the chaos, Envoy Jing was killed and 2 suspects escaped. Now they are asking for reinforcements from the Alliance." Hearing that, Songtiei couldn't help but gasp. This woman is really vicious. After discussing with Mo Tianxian, Suyu decided to save the sacred Kailin with a careful plan. If they were careless, they would not only fail to save the sacred Kailin, but also get themselves killed. Now, the world of the martial arts tower was in their hands. If Xianran wanted to get the martial arts tower, she wouldn't kill the sacred Kailin easily. On the deck of the merchant ship, Suyu looked at the Star River in the distance. In the Star River, most of the areas were buried in the darkness. They were cold and gloomy. Except for the ferocious wild beasts, there were no other creatures. Occasionally, in a very distant place, a flicker of starlight could be seen, and a star was emitting a faint light quietly. Now, Suyu knew that it was not a star, but a world of cavern. Most of them were abandoned. With the continuous improvement of the deity's cultivation, more and more cavern worlds would be created. The old cavern worlds would be abandoned after being moved away, just like the cavern worlds of the Jiuzhou continent. For millions of years, it was unknown how many cavern worlds had been abandoned. They floated in the galaxy, not destroyed and not extinguished, accumulating more and more. Over time, they became existences like stars, giving a faint light to the gloomy galaxy of the universe. Standing in the Star River, Suyu had an indescribable feeling. He felt that a single creature was as small as a speck of dust in the vast world. Woo-woo! Suddenly, a loud whistle came from the merchant ship. Suyu was no stranger to this. In the past 2 months, he would stop in a cavern world once a month. In the past 2 months, Suyu learned from the crew that in another 10 years, the route of the Jiuzhou continent would be cancelled, just like those gradually abandoned stars. The cavern world that he stopped in was similar in size to the Jiuzhou continent, but it was very dim. To judge the prosperity of a cavern world, it could be easily judged from its appearance. The more abundant the celestial source origin of the cavern world, the brighter it would be in the dark Star River and vice versa. As the merchant ship approached, the smell of blood came from it. The mortal fairy crew, standing on both sides of the ladder, braced themselves to prevent any unexpected creatures from boarding the ship. The merchant ship had only one entrance, which was the ladder. The rest of the directions were protected by the deities, unless the deities boarded the ship by force. However, the deities could cross the Star River with their bodies. Why would they need to use the divine bone ship? The smell of blood also drifted into Suyu's ears, which made him frown slightly. Most of the blood was from the human clan, but there was also some smell of the demon clan. Not only the Jiuzhou continent had the demon clan, but other cavern worlds also had the demon clan. Alas, another cavern world ruined by the demon clan. Is this the cavern world of the mountain god that died 3,000 years ago? It was destroyed after all. The old mortal fairy with a soft mouth sighed. Well, recently more and more abandoned cavern worlds have been massacred by the Devil Clan. Their actions have become more frequent, and the consequences are worrying. Traveling with the merchant ship all the way, their experience was far better than ordinary people, and they had seen many similar scenes. Clatter! Suddenly, at the exit of the cavern world, a large number of people rushed in like a tide. Behind them, a flock of black crows were chasing them. They were full of demon energy and looked far more ferocious than real crows. These were the unique demon crows of the demon realm. They were cruel and bloodthirsty, fast, and extremely difficult to deal with. Among them, there was a huge demon crow of the fourth realm of the mortal fairy, which was even more ferocious. It was shrouded in black flames, and its power was monstrous. The faces of the two mortal fairies at the mouth of the soft ladder changed. Black crows of the peak mortal fairy hissed the demon clan that drove them. Their cultivation must be even stronger, right? The demon crows were exceptionally unruly and only surrendered to the stronger ones. There must be a very powerful existence behind this group of demon crows. The group of fleeing humans fought and retreated, and one of them, a rather young human, caught Su Yu's attention. He fought the demon crow king alone with a hammer. Often, with a sweep of the hammer, a large number of demon crows of the mortal fairy realm turned into flying ashes. If he had not resisted, the demon crows would have rushed up like a tide and killed all of them. Get on the ship immediately. The young man with the hammer did not look back. He shouted while fighting the demon crows like a god of war. The surviving humans took out their tickets and asked to board the ship. There were not many of them, only 200 or 300 left, and each of them had a good cultivation. The highest was the mortal fairy realm, and the weakest was the almighty realm. They were the last creatures in this deserted cavern world. The soft ladder was lowered, and they boarded the ship one after another. However, the young man with the hammer was alone, and a large number of demon crows tore through the defense line and attacked. The humans who had no time to board the ship died one after another. The strong mortal fairies on both sides of the soft ladder could not bear it, but they were indifferent. Their mission was to guard the entrance of the merchant ship, and they were not allowed to leave. However, the old man of the mortal fairy realm, seeing that his companions had fallen one after another, shook his torn sleeves and gave up boarding the ship. He turned around and fought with the group of demon crows. "You go first. I will block them." The old mortal fairy showed a resolute look and ran the strength of the mortal fairy and fought with the demon crows. However, among the demon crows, there were several demon crows of the mortal fairy realm, and there were many demon crows of the peak of all creations. How could the old mortal fairy be their opponent? Soon he was surrounded, and there were more wounds on his body. The strength of the mortal fairy was rapidly consumed by the demon crows. In a moment he would be torn apart and eaten by the demon crows. At the same time, the demon crows that were not blocked rushed to the people who had no time to board the ship. For a moment, screams were heard. Although they tried their best to resist, they were no match for the demon crows. Su Yu sighed secretly. If the sacred Kylin had not sealed the entrance of the cavern world before he died, the creatures of Jojo would have been destroyed by the demon clan or some other forces on a certain day in thousands of years. "Seniors, if I get off the ship to help, can I return to the ship again?" Su Yu asked. He did not have a ticket. If he could not come back after getting off the ship, it would be terrible.